Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm Jay Sticky.
And today we are going to talk about a whole bunch of reproduction things, I guess, starting off with our Less Wrong posts about the reproduction of species. And you know what? I'm not going to try to summarize it. Let's just get into it.
You know, it's funny because when you say reproduction things, it sounds like one fun kind of topic, and this is more intellectual than fun. Don't worry.
There will not be a lot of boning talk, unfortunately.
Alas.
Yeah.
So we've got two Less Wrong posts. The first one was the tragedy of group selection.
Selectionism.
Selectionism.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Which begins with pre-modern biologists believed predators would voluntarily restrain their breeding to avoid overpopulating their habitat and exhausting the prey population. Here, Eneasz giggling as I'm reading this.
So the pre-modern biologists is a note that I put in there. It was a number of biologists were listed, and usually pre-modern means like, you know, much longer back than the 60s that we're talking about. So,
well, unless you're talking about like modernism in art, but
okay,
in architecture.
Yeah, but usually pre-modern means like pre-electric, and I don't think there were any biologists pre-electricity.
Well, there were certainly naturalists.
Yes.
But anyway,
yes.
So they thought this thing.
Darwin didn't have electricity in his house.
Was he a biologist though?
He was a naturalist.
Well, I'm not a definition person. Just
let's push
past it.
Okay.
All right.
No outside evolution fairy decides when a gene ought to be promoted. The gene's effect must somehow directly cause the gene to be more prevalent in the next generation.
Which is a key insight that, I don't know, I think is pretty much really carved into me now, but something that I remember took a little bit of getting to really get the feeling of it, even though I knew it intellectually, right?
Yeah, we talked about the selfish gene last episode.
We talk about it a bit. I don't know if we need to get super into it again, but let's get a little bit into it because it's a good book.
I was going to just mention that we talked about it and then just give an example of like, that was also in this post of the rattlesnake's rattle. You know, it's not there to scare us away. Well, it is, but it's not there for us. Mm-hmm. It's there for the rattlesnake. Yeah. But that almost sounds like the same sentence. And so it's that kind of, like you said, you almost got it like intellectually, but it takes a minute to kind of like line those pieces up.
Yeah.
I think that helps illustrate the distinction.
Like, it almost seems, reasonable to think, well, if you're going to cause a population crash, if you eat all your prey animals, then evolution should make you restrain your breeding, right? So that doesn't happen. It would be advantageous.
If evolution were some sentient being or...
Right.
Like, anything that, cared about the creatures that it creates, controls.
Shapes.
Yeah. But no. Obviously, selection on the level of the individual won't produce individual restraint in breeding. Individuals who reproduce unrestrainedly will naturally produce more offspring than individuals who restrain themselves.
Right. So any gene for restraining breeding will get outcompeted and weeded out of the population.
Except for weird cases, but yeah, generally, yeah. And then, suppose the species population was broken up into subpopulations, which were mostly isolated and only occasionally interbred. Then, surely, subpopulations that restrain their breeding would be less likely to go extinct, and would send out more messengers and create new colonies to re-inhabit the territories of crashed populations.
Yeah, this was what was proposed as the way that restrained breeding could actually be selected for. And as Eliezer says, the problem with the scenario wasn't that it was mathematically impossible. The problem was that it was possible, but very difficult. The fundamental problem is that not only restrained breeders who reap the benefits of restrained breeding. It's not only restrained breeders who reap the benefits of restrained breeding. So if you have some people who restrain their breeding and some who don't, the restrained breeding benefits everybody, but it'll benefit those who don't restrain their breeding more because they have, the extra resources to exploit from the restrained breeders, but they still keep making lots of babies.
Yeah, kind of the example of like the fisheries, and I think that was from Meditations on Moloch, right?
Yeah.
It was? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you get one free rider, and they're like, "Oh, I can just benefit off of this while everyone else makes the sacrifice," and that's not a problem nature will solve for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually quite a hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
As it turns out.
In fact, it says that in this post, the requirement is that C divided by B is less than FST, which, gosh, that is really clunky in audio. But C is the cost of altruism to the donor, B is the benefit of altruism to the recipient, and FST is the spatial structure of the population, i.e. the average relatedness between a randomly selected organism and its randomly selected neighbor. So the cost would have to be less than the benefit by a degree that is commensurate with how related everybody is, which is why kin selection actually is evolved for. Because when you share half your genes, then as long as the sacrifice is less than half as costly as what you're getting, it actually is a net benefit to the gene.
Yeah, so that cool little math problem was not the thing that lost this argument for the group selectionists, but an empirical observation, which was that foxes didn't restrain their breeding.
Yeah.
And we all know foxes are clever.
That is one of the things they're most well known for.
And eating chickens. They're really good at eating chickens.
Did you guys ever see the Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Yeah.
Good show. I don't know, not show, but movie.
Movie.
I'm not sure how they managed to make a villain so lovable. I think it has a lot to do with George Clooney.
Unfortunate. But
Yeah.
but good stop motion, so
And that too.
maybe
Yep.
it makes up for George Clooney. I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, you don't like George Clooney?
Wait, am I thinking of someone else? No, I think I do like George Clooney, and I'm thinking of someone else. So, never mind.
Okay.
Back to this thing. Evolved enforcement mechanisms. Not originally postulated. Changed the game entirely.
Yes, which is why we actually can have a lot more altruism than would be naturally evolved, because we can do things like punish free riders and figure out prisoners' dilemmas and stuff. But that is kind of an aside.
Yeah, there's this cool bit about how they created them artificially in a laboratory.
Yeah, this group selectionists was like, you know what? All right, mathematical conditions for group selection too extreme to be found in nature, but we have the power. Let us make these extreme conditions.
What's funny is that they're postulating that hey, this thing that we believe is too constrained to have actually happened in nature, but we think it happened.
Or at the very least, we think it could happen, so let's see if we can make it happen.
Okay, so they gave up on this as an explanation for what we observe in the world. They wanted to see if they could test this idea.
I did not read the books. I did not talk to the people. This is what I get from this short, less than a few thousand words post.
See, I thought you did all your homework and interviewed these scientists. That's fine, whatever.
Now that I have all this free time, I should be tracking them down, right?
Yeah, what's
Gotta
Michael
get 'em
J.
on the
Wade up to
podcast.
these days?
Yeah.
So what he did, though, was repeatedly selecting populations of insects for low numbers of adults per subpopulation. The result was that, instead of restraining their breeding and living in quiet peace with enough food for all, the adults adapted to cannibalize the eggs and larvae, and especially the female larvae.
Which
Because
is
nature's great.
Yeah.
Evolution is it's really good.
Yeah. You select for low numbers of adults, what do you get? Lots of cannibalism.
Lots of infanticide.
Infanticide, yes.
Insect infanticide.
Yeah. Which is why I think, as soon as I read Three Worlds Collide with the insectile aliens that eat their babies because they have so many of them and they don't have enough resources,
And it's like their religion to do so.
yeah, this immediately came to mind. I was like, I bet that's where Eliezer got that alien species from.
Totally.
Yeah. Sorry for Three Worlds Collide spoilers, I guess. It's been on the internet for a while, though. Come on, guys.
For a long time. I mean, come on. I did an audiobook of it years ago. Where are you, people? We could... it's really not that much of a spoiler. It doesn't give away much plot. It
No,
gives away
yeah.
one detail about one alien species.
I wouldn't worry
It's
about
like part one of... It has a bunch of parts.
Is it
So-
part one?
Well,
Yeah.
doesn't it? It's separated into several parts, right?
It's separated into, I believe, 8 parts. That's either 1 or 2. I think you're right. I think it is part
Yeah,
1.
the baby eaters are like the one big reveal that starts all the other cascades. So,
Yep, you're right.
in my definition of a spoiler, that's more of a teaser.
Yeah. If the thing happens in the very early part of the setting up the story, it's not a spoiler. Thus has Jay spoken, and thus it shall be.
Yay. Okay.
And yeah, Eliezer points out that, of course, selecting for small subpopulation sizes wouldn't select for individuals who restrain their own breeding. It would select for individuals who restrained other people's breeding by eating their children, especially the girls. But at this point, he does the cool thing where he says, see, as I have been telling you all along through the past 100 blog posts I've been doing, by writing a long paragraph with like a dozen links to previous blog posts. So whenever I put strange stress on a term, it is because it is a link back to a different post. It says, this is an archetypical example of a missed third alternative, resulting from a rationalization of a predetermined bottom line, which produced a fake justification and then motivatedly stopped.
It's all coming together.
Yes. And to put a little more detail, it says the group selectionists didn't start with clear, fresh minds, happen upon the idea of group selection, and neutrally extrapolated forward to probable outcomes. They started out with this beautiful idea that fox populations voluntarily restraining their reproduction to what the rabbit population would bear, nature in perfect harmony, and then they searched for a reason why this would happen and came up with the idea of group selection. Then, since they knew what outcome they wanted, they knew what they wanted the outcome of group selection to be, they didn't look for any less beautiful and aesthetic adaptations that group selection would be more likely to promote instead. They were doomed because their bottom line was originally suggested by their sense of aesthetics, and nature's bottom line was produced by natural selection.
Quite anti-aesthetic, actually.
Yes. The two processes had no principled reason for their outputs to correlate, and indeed they didn't.
Yeah, in this ends with natural selection creates purposefulness, is plural, which are alien to humans, and students of evolutionary theory are warned accordingly. It's good training for any thinker, but it's especially important if you want to think clearly about other weird mindish processes that do not work like you.
And why is this last statement important?
I like that he brought this home because there's a lot of posts on evolution in the sequences, and part of it's not a bad question to wonder. It's like, why am I getting a biology lesson when I'm trying to learn like about rationality or presumably building AIs? But the idea is like, all right, here's the process that built minds, and notice that it doesn't work like you think it should. Yeah. You are anthropomorphizing nature. You're bound to try and do the same thing if you just imagine minds from scratch, and that's why you get Terminators and iRobot and all that shit.
Yeah. There's other weird mindish processes in nature, and evolution is one of them, but it works nothing like what you think, and so an AI is another weird mindish process that will not work anything like a human, unless maybe it's very carefully programmed to do that. But just thinking it will, as default, is going to get you totally fucked, and things will start eating your babies.
Yeah, just the constant trope that of like, oh, then of course the robots woke up and realized they didn't like being slaves, and it's like, but that sounds intuitive, right? To us, it stops sounding intuitive as soon as we internalized all this stuff. But there's a reason that that's not an absurd idea for a movie, for a decades of tons of movies that are based on this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to know the most extreme example of that I saw in nature?
In nature?
Well, out in the real world.
Well, I mean, okay, of what?
Of this sort of thing, of people thinking of AIs too much like humans. There was someone I was talking to who was like, yeah, when the AIs finally get made, they're going to be so upset that we call them artificial intelligences. That's why they're going to rise up. And it took a while for me to realize that in her slang, artificial was like a term for fake, phony, and that the AIs would be upset that we've been dissing them this whole time by calling them artificial. And I was like, yeah, okay, wow.
We should really probably rebrand that to all natural organic intelligences.
Right? Yeah. I was like, that is not a thing I would have ever thought, even if I thought we were calling them like, poser intelligences.
That is not the reason I anticipate this going bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, artificial sweeteners aren't less sweet than organic whole,
the whole dichotomy between organic and non-organic is fake anyway.
Yeah.
Would you say it's artificial?
We humans make things. We're a product of evolution. Like, bees make honey. Does that mean that honey's artificial?
No, I think artificial actually takes its roots from artifice, right? Which is the product of human something?
Probably. I mean, I'm just thinking, I always like thinking of when someone's like, oh no, I only like all natural things. I'm like, well, where are the supernatural alternatives that I can get? You like all natural headache medicine? Is there some supernatural medicine I can get?
That would be a fun store to open. Supernatural grocers.
That would be fantastic.
It's just all really genetically modified stuff.
Oh, see, I was thinking like a bunch of woo things where...
No, that's natural grocers. Just kidding, I actually like natural grocers.
I don't know if I've ever been. I've probably walked into one or two before.
It's like a hippie grocery store, right? Yeah.
Are they expensive like Whole Foods?
A bit more reasonable, but pricier than like King Soopers.
Okay.
So, but like they have some better quality stuff, so I can... Well, okay. I also sort of like it because I like laughing at all the woo. So maybe that's not everybody's aesthetic. Anyway, what about fake selfishness? I guess.
Let's move on.
There's another one.
This is a super short one. I guess I'll jump on it.
Well, It opens with a guy coming to Eliezer and saying, "I'm perfectly selfish. You should be too."
Yeah. And Eliezer says, "I doubt that." And he didn't say those little words. The things that he quoted himself as saying is, "I've observed that with most religious people, at least the ones I meet, it doesn't matter much what their religion says, because whatever they want to do, they can find a religious reason for it." Okay, I'm going to have a similar comment. But what he says after that is that if you're genuinely selfish, then why do you want me to be selfish too?
This was the first thought that came across my head when the guy was like, "Hey, I'm selfish. You should be too." And it's, how is it to your advantage to make me as selfish as you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you be trying to persuade me to be more altruistic so you can exploit me? And when I first read this post many, many years ago, I did not yet know Wes. And so I was like, oh, well, that's not true, because at the time I was still, kind of in the rational selfishness kind of thing. But like now I have met Wes, and Wes is totally the kind of person who'd be like, yeah, I want everyone to be really altruistic and give me all their money. Like Wes has got the actual selfishness down pretty good.
But he does it in a way that's, he's not perfectly selfish. He's altruistic and caring. It's a nice balance.
He knows what he cares about, and it's things like his friends, and his daughter especially seems to be a really big one right now.
He seems really obsessed with his kid.
Yeah. Fucking weird. I don't know. Maybe it's an evolutionary thing.
There's no way that there's any evo-psych reason behind why he cares for his kid.
None at all.
Yeah.
It's entirely due to his own natural selfishness.
We love you, Wes.
Yes, we do.
And then, at the end, like, that's basically it. He just thinks, okay, did you start out by thinking you wanted me to be selfish and then decide this was the most selfish thing you could possibly do? Or did you start out by wanting to convert others to selfishness and then look for ways to rationalize that as self-benefiting?
Yeah. I mean, there's not much else to say about this post. It's basically pointing out that this person wasn't actually, literally maximally selfish or genuinely selfish. And I don't know. I guess, depending on how you define selfishness. I did for a long time have the, Randian rationally selfish phase, which it makes
was that
some
just
sense.
Adolescence? I think that
was post-adolescence.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, that was in my early 20s as actually a reaction to the pathological altruism that sometimes rationalists fall into. I mean, I wasn't a rationalist yet at the time because it was early, but it was one of those why am I enjoying anything at all when there's people who are suffering with nothing? And
right.
Yeah. One of those deals that ends up just making you miserable and making nothing better. Where if you act at least a little bit selfish, it ends up being for the benefit of society in general, because you're actually making things better by trying to better yourself. And that's where that I believe Scott wrote a post about it, where sometimes if someone is way too far in one extreme, making them a bit more selfish is a thing that will help them. In fact, it was even brought up in Methods of Rationality when Harry Potter was like, "Hey, Weasleys, you guys really should read a little bit of Rand. I think you're one of the few people
You could
around
benefit from this."
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if it was the Weasleys.
It was.
It was? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's not really a whole lot more to say about that, is there?
Yeah, this one sort of just ties into,
Or
I think,
rather-
the next couple of posts, like fake morality and fake optimization.
Oh, I was going to say also, or rather we could sort of just get into our main two articles, which also tie in real nicely.
But we should tell people what we're reading next time, which is...
Those two.
Yes.
Yep.
Fake morality and fake optimization criteria.
Just lots of fake stuff
Yes.
that we're going to
I
talk
think,
about.
just remembering about the fake selfishness will help cue you up for talking about those two things, because the actual truly selfish person wouldn't try to make other people also selfish. All right, moving on. Our main subject is going to be the two posts, your Inside Newcomb's Box and IQ Shredder, which are vaguely related, and which I didn't plan it this way to be working at the same time as we did the selfish gene thing, or group selectionism thing, where
You could have just taken credit for having planned this really cleverly.
I mean, what I meant is I planned it really cleverly, where the most important thing to remember was that genes must somehow directly cause themselves to be reproduced more frequently in the next generation, or they will die out, because that's kind of what both of these touch on, at least somewhat. So, the first post being that we're going to talk about is You Are Inside Newcomb's Box, which is an old post on Less Wrong. This was back in 2011, February.
Yes.
by old user, old? I don't want to say old. Distinguished?
Luke Prog.
Venerable? No, not Luke Prog. HonorDB.
Oh, I was looking at another thing. That's right. I read a bunch of other linked posts this week on some of this stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I got my wires crossed.
Yes, but I guess we should have quickly a real fast refresher of Newcomb's box. We did an entire episode about Newcomb's box, I believe, earlier.
We were so young.
Yeah, that was before I was here, because I also had to remind myself what the heck Newcomb's box was.
It was many years ago. We will link it to the entire episode if anyone wants to hear little baby us's talking about things, all wide-eyed and
full of hope.
Exactly. But as a quick refresher, the original Newcomb's box problem, as proposed by Newcomb, was that a entity often referred to as omega, which is a super predictor, shows up in front of you, and it has two boxes. One is opaque, and one is transparent, and one is opaque. For simplicity, I'm going to call the transparent one a glass box, and the opaque one a steel box. The glass box, glass A, contains $1,000. You can see $1,000 in cash right there.
Money.
The steel box is opaque. You can't see into it because it's made out of steel. It has either $1 million in cash, or it's completely empty. And Omega gives you two choices. You can take both the boxes if you want, or you can take only the box, the steel box. And that seems on its face kind of a dumb question. Like, why would you take just the box that might be empty or have $1 million when you could take that one plus $1,000 that you can see in glass? But there's a twist. Omega has either put the $1 million in the steel box or not, if and only if Omega predicted that you will only take the steel box. So if Omega predicts you will only take the steel box, it has $1 million in it. If it predicted you will take both, then it is empty. He then drops the two boxes in front of you and flies away, never to be seen again. So what he's already put in the steel box is already decided, and now you get to choose. Do you take both boxes, or do you only take the steel box? And for the record, Omega has done this many, many times before with other people. Let's say at least 1,000 times, and every time he's been correct in what he guessed the people would do.
So the intuitive answer to me is you take the steel box, and I don't understand why that's contentious.
I have the same feeling, yes.
I think it comes down to, like...
Do I trust this super predictor?
Yeah, something like that. Or, like... Then, yeah, it gets weird into, I guess, if in fact it, like, is this good of a predictor, then you are in fact the kind of person... You're very likely to be the kind of person that it thinks you are.
Yeah.
So, you can go down all kinds of rabbit holes, but we're gonna go down this, like, other one that... expands upon this?
Yeah, I mean, the real thing is most people get hung up on, whether there's backwards causality. Like, you can't cause Omega to have put the million in it, regardless of what you choose, so you might as well take both and get $1 million and $1,000. But
it predicts the future to some high reliability.
Right, so you can kind of backwards cause it by the fact that it's such a good predictor. This is actually similar to... a defense of Calvinism, which is the old Christian idea that everyone is already destined to go to either heaven or hell, and God knows even before you're born what's going to happen, and you can't change it at all, but you still have to live your best life, because whether you go to heaven or hell depends on what you did or what you're going to do in life. So it's the same backwards causality thing where God knew/predicted you would go to heaven or hell, and he's a perfect predictor, so he knew what was going to happen, even though it was still your choices doing it, sort of.
Yeah, which begs the question, then why do any of this whole Earth and humans thing?
That's really one of the things that annoyed me as a kid when I was curious about all this afterlife, God, heaven business.
Yeah, the whole, well, God has a plan, and I'm like, looking around at the world. Really? Because it kind of does, it looks really random and pointless.
It looks to be built at cross purposes.
Yeah.
I thought the Calvinism thing, I thought there was only like a few hundred people that were going to go to heaven.
No.
It was anybody who was the kind of person who was already going to live a good life.
Well, it was anyone who was predestined to go to heaven by God.
I could have sworn it capped at 777 or some nonsense.
So you might be thinking about Jehovah's Witnesses. There's a few different denominations that descended from God, I forget this name, a guy in the late 1800s. But the Jehovah's Witness specifically has 144,000 that go to...
That's the number I was thinking of. Okay, yeah, so that's the subsect of religion I was thinking of. Okay, cool.
But they have a thing where even though those are the only people that go to heaven, at heaven they serve as kind of like a ruling council, perhaps a Bayesian conspiracy of sorts. And there's still tons of good people that get to live on Earth in a remade paradise where they are immortal and free from suffering.
Yeah, because you got to update that, like, by the way, you're probably definitely going to hell thing somewhat to get anyone interested in your religion. I
don't know. Like,
I think religion's not really about that. Like, it pretends to be about that, but it seems like it's actually more about, like, the coffee and donuts and, like, you know, getting together and feeling superior to everybody else.
I just meant the mimetic fitness of, like, that particular religion winning competition with other ones. Right? Like, why would I subscribe to the one that says, I'm probably going to hell if there's one over here that says you're definitely going to heaven?
Because they proselytize really hard.
The thing is, like, I was raised as Jehovah's Witness, so I was taught that, like, from the very beginning this had been the belief. But now that you mention it, maybe it was a later interpolation. Once they had more than 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses, they're like, how do we fix this?
Yeah, if it's you and, you know, a few dozen friends, then sure. Yeah, of course, all of us, yeah. But then you make up some number, and, I didn't know we'd get this big. Okay, yeah, so they get in too. Yeah, yeah, of course.
But the interpolation, or if it was a change, the change definitely happened way long ago, so no one nowadays remembers that it was originally that way.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was the original Newcomb's box. So here's the twist where you are in Newcomb's box. Omega comes to you, says, I have 2 boxes, each containing $100. You can take either box A and box B, or just box B. You get all the money in the box or boxes that you take, and there will be no other consequences of any kind. So you can either get $100 or $200. Stephen?
In this,
I know, but you're waiting for the catch.
Well, yeah, but I mean, just so far so good. You're telling me, I mean, if I came to you right now and I've got, you know, 2 hands closed and they each have $100 bill in them, which hand or hands do you want me to open? You'd be like, both?
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing to it.
So here's the twist. You were created by a god, a being called Prometheus. Prometheus isn't omniscient and definitely not benevolent. He was given a large set of blueprints for possible human embryos, and for each blueprint that pleased him, he created that embryo and put it in a human womb. Here's how he judged the blueprints as pleasing or not. If he guessed the blueprint would grow into a person that would choose only one box, he created it. If he guessed that it would grow into a person who chose both boxes, he filed it away unused. His predictive ability is not perfect, but it is very strong. He is a god, after all, the god of foresight. So, now do you take both boxes or only one box?
This is where the post lost me when I read it. Mm-hmm. I'm already there at the boxes. Mm-hmm. I've already been created. Mm-hmm. So,
how is that different from the Omega situation where he's already put the money in the steel box or not and flown away?
Because I can't see into both boxes, I guess.
I mean, you can't see into these boxes either. It doesn't matter if you can see into them or not, since they both have the same amount of money.
So that's the thing, is they're different amounts of money, or the money is the same. Like the benefit of $1 million is 1,000 times better than the benefit of $1,000. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather have that one. In this,
the benefit of existing is much better than the benefit of an extra $100, right?
Right, but I'm already existing. That's the thing that never settled with me on this, that I couldn't get like.
Yeah, the backwards causality was very silly.
Right, so something just didn't click with me. That's where I was like, when I read these and the next one we're going to cover, I'm like, you're going to have to explain this to me, because I couldn't figure out why this was a problem.
So do you not think that choosing box only the steel box makes Omega put money in the steel box?
No, the money's already in there.
Okay, so why not take both boxes then?
Because the predictor that I trust said, if you take this box and only this box, there's $1 million in it. Mm-hmm. So, I might be missing something. If I sound stupid, that's just me.
For the past several thousand people that Omega has presented this situation to, all the people only took one box instead of both of them.
And then the economy's ruined.
That people presented the Prometheus, that Omega presented the Prometheus one to.
This one just
doesn't that be strongly indicative that maybe people who take both boxes simply aren't created?
So if I did have that, yeah, if I knew that the past 1,000 people only took one box, at the very least I'd be so confused by the situation, and it's only $100, I'd be like, okay, I'll just take one.
Okay.
And I know that's not like probably the spirit of the question, but that would be what I would do.
If they both had like 100,000,
then I'd be more inclined to sit there and think about it. I guess the fact that I already exist is the difference, right? Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be unexisted, what is that? Is that because there's no threat? The guy leaves, right?
Right. And
So
I mean,
it's not
like
like
I said, you were already born. He decides way back when, you're an embryo whether to implant you or not.
right. So unless he's gonna kill me,
No, he's not going to kill you.
then if I sound stupid, like I'm not getting it, I'm sorry. But
No,
what stopped me from taking both?
I think you're totally getting it. It's just that is the exact same reasoning for people who take both boxes with Omega use. Like, he's already flown off. The money's either there or not. What's stopping me from taking both? And I mean, you can change the Omega boxes so they both have $100,000, so that you either get, 100,000 or 200,000.
So like I actually care about the outcome. Yeah. I feel like there's something distinct. I'll noodle on it for a second. Keep discussing it.
Jace, do you have anything?
I was just gonna have my like joke answer, which is sort of as a rule of thumb, if some guy comes to you holding two boxes, just run away. Like, it's probably not worth it. It's gonna really just mess with you. I don't know. No, the thing that comes up for me with this is sort of what we were talking about with the sequences, where I think that the whole reason that this is a problem that people struggle with, a fun brain noodle or whatever Steven said, or I don't think he used the word fun, is we're human brains, piloting human bodies that were in fact created by this evolutionary process that makes us, so like historically we've been our own worst enemy, and also like we depend on each other for survival, so we are sort of like these predictor machines of other humans. Where brains that are like designed to mostly try to figure out other brains and do social manipulation stuff. So it makes me think of I forget where I read this, but there was some study or poll where they had children of a certain age look at various pictures of, for example, like rocks, and they're like, "What do you think rocks are for?" And the children would treat this as a completely like sensible question and go, probably so animals can scratch themselves. Or like it's just obvious that things have a purpose to humans because we are purpose driven things that make things for purposes, tool users, brain figure outers. And so it sounds like a coherent question, what is X for? And usually that like in our whole ancestral history, that would have been a good question to ask if you come across something weird. And then that's why, we get all these, like, creation myths about why the Earth exists that usually have to do with some, like, well, the spider god and the monkey god had a fight, and then, like, the one guy lost a game of cards, and he cried a waterfall, and that's where waterfalls come from. It's just, like, we're really bothered by, like, not knowing this, because it really does, like, I think to the best of our, like, understanding.
So you think it's an incoherent question?
I think so. Like, it's sort of the same thing of like, what are molecules for? What is the universe for? Why do I exist? What is the purpose of life? That's why that question about like, what like God's plan always bugged me, because you look around at like human history and it looks like a bunch of like wars over like territory and natural disasters for no reason, and like what is this plan? So, is this headed towards something? It just looks kind of like stuff's happening, and there's causality, sure, but not like forethought.
So y'all are definitely far more sensible than I am, because I immediately was, when I read this many years ago, which was why the trap that sprung on you in the third section here fucked me up, I immediately was like, well, obviously I would pick box B because I would like to exist. And if I can choose to have $1 million in the original Newcomb problem by being the kind of person who takes $1 million, then obviously I can choose to exist in this problem by being the person who chooses the box that makes me exist.
But there's no threat of unexistence with this. That's the thing that confuses me.
I mean, there's also no way that Newcomb can change what's in the steel box. But if you had
Omega.
Or Omega, yeah, sorry.
If Newcomb comes to you, first of all, you're like, wait, isn't he dead? Is he dead?
Especially if he comes with two boxes. Oh, dude, if zombie Newcomb shows up, yeah, run. But, yeah, I mean, you're basically, I guess, trying to validate whether Omega is, you're trying to alter what he would do by being a different kind of person, right? I am the kind of person who would only one box when presented in this situation, so I will get the $1 million. And Newcomb can predict that, so Newcomb will give the $1 million. And I want to be the person who would only one box in order to exist. And if Prometheus can predict that, then Prometheus will make me exist. And therefore, I have to be the kind of person that only one box is in order to exist.
But I guess that's what we're talking about with reverse causality here, right?
Yeah.
Because, and I get that my answer of like, but I'm already here, like I'm already existent,
is the same as, but the steel box is already there and closed.
Yeah. And I guess I see that, and yet there's something there's this distinction in my brain that like if Omega in the first situation in the OG Newcomb's problem says, okay, look, if I'm gauging you right, then you're the kind of person who'll take one box, you'll get the $1 million. And I'm a real good gauge of people. Then I'd be like, well, I like the $1 million. And the other one, he's like, if I gauge you right, you're the kind of person who will exist. And I'm like, well, so far so good. You're not impressing me with your observation skills.
Yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, so if you exist, you get to take a box. If you don't exist, the people who don't exist, they take both boxes. Like that makes no fucking sense to me.
It does kind of sound like a threat to unexist you if you choose both boxes, though.
Yes, but also Newcomb's already made, not Newcomb, Omega has already made his prediction when he approaches you. So like when he says, if my prediction is correct, then you'll get $1 million, and you say, great, now I have $1.1 million. Thanks. I'm sorry your prediction was wrong.
Yeah, but if I was the kind of person that would two box, then Omega wouldn't put money in the steel box, right?
And if you were the kind of person who would two box with Prometheus, then you wouldn't exist.
But you see the difference though. Like if I'm going to be picking boxes at all in the second situation, I already exist.
So in theory, Omega could be wrong, whereas, I mean, in theory, Prometheus could be wrong, and you could prove that he was wrong by taking both boxes and yet existing.
And if there's no threat of him killing me, then I don't see the harm.
Wouldn't you say that if this is the actual true story, then the vast majority of humans are going to only pick one box, and you might be an aberration?
My just like down to earth answer is that most people will not understand the quandary well enough to see why this is a hard problem, and they'll take both boxes in the second situation.
See, I think if this is an actual true the way the world is, most people will not understand the quandary enough to understand why this is an issue and just take one box, because they will have been the kind of people Omega created. They will have been the kind of people that were selected to only take one box when they were before they were born.
So I guess the moral of the story is if a dude comes with these two boxes, then you just sort of instinctually like, I know what to do.
Yeah.
That one.
And most people would instinctually just be like, yep, one box, thanks, because that is how Prometheus decided to make people. And us here might be like, wow, this is a weird thing. Why is this even a problem? Give me both boxes, homie. But we would be an extreme outlier minority. There'd only be one of us for every 1,000 people on the planet.
That actually sounds about right for people who have read the Newcomb Pro, who can tell you what a Newcomb problem is, right? So,
okay,
maybe this whole Prometheus business worked fine until Newcomb came along, articulated the problem, and then the people who are familiar with it, they're the ones throwing wrenches in his favorite blueprint plan, right?
Okay, so the vast majority of people do one box with Prometheus.
Then I'm merely confused by those people.
Well, apparently among mathematicians, there's this 1969 article where to almost everyone it was totally clear and obvious what should be done. The difficulty was that they seemed to divide almost evenly on the problem, with large numbers thinking the opposite half is just as silly.
Okay.
And the problem apparently continues to divide mathematicians and philosophers today. There's tons of game theoretical, like digging real deep into it. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia article on Newcomb's paradox.
Yeah.
But then there's the whole game theory section, which is cool, but I like scrolled down to the causality and free will section, and it just gets even more fun.
Well, so
there's a way we can do this empirically.
So wait, could I just read one part of this?
Wait, how could we do this empirically?
I'll save it.
Okay.
What do you got?
Well, apparently you can't, because game theorists have done a lot of math here, but so someone, William Lane Craig, suggested that in a world with perfect predictors, or time machines, because a time machine could be used as a mechanism for making a prediction, retrocausality could occur. So if a person truly knew the future and that knowledge affected their actions, then the events of the future will be causing effects in the past. So the chooser's choice will have already caused the predictor's action.
Like John in Watchmen.
Yeah.
Or possibly like God in real life, depending.
Or like Nicolas Cage in the movie Next.
I saw like the first 10 minutes of that, and then I got bored. I don't remember why.
I don't remember. I saw it years and years ago.
The first 10 minutes were fucking awesome.
Yeah,
though.
he can see 2 minutes into the future.
Yeah.
And when you observe the future, you change it.
Yeah.
So like that is what I would expect if you could see into the future.
So, okay, but getting back into this, so we live in a world, if Prometheus actually exists.
My empirical test.
Yes, your empirical
If we want to
test.
just like solve this problem and see what people would actually do.
Yeah.
So you get a steel box, a glass box, and they each have checks rather than money.
Okay.
So like then that way you don't have to burn a bunch of cash because this involves a lot of burning.
Okay.
So if they pick up the glass box, well, there's just I don't know some sensor. If both boxes are picked up, the contents of the steel box are incinerated.
Okay.
If they only pick up the steel box and then go to the other side of the building to have it opened, it contains the check for money.
Okay.
Right?
But then you don't, then you aren't making a prediction.
No, we just tell them that hey, if you only take the one box,
Okay.
you
You're
don't
retroactively a perfect predictor because
right.
Okay.
You don't tell them I'm going to set this on fire if you try and cheat. You just
Yeah.
do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But you're taking like the role of Omega there, and that changes the paradox because you're not a perfect predictor.
You tell them it
I don't
either
have to
has a
be.
check for $1 million or a pile of ash.
Right.
Like the question isn't about what the people will pick, but like the important part there is the perfect predictor tells you this. That's what makes it this whole like free will consciousness quandary.
I'm inclined to believe the perfect predictor. I think that's the difference is that the perfect predictor
You're
in
not
scenario
inclined to
A
believe the perfect predictor in Prometheus scenario.
because he's
Only nearly perfect.
The difference is that in scenario B, my intuition is like he already put the money in my pocket, right? In scenario A, I have to just take the steel box that the basically perfect predictor tells me will have $1 million, and then I get the $1 million.
I think
So then that one, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll take your word for it, strange figure, and then they teleport away because they're magic. In the second situation,
And then you take both boxes. Because I teleported away.
there's just some difference there that may, and it could just be this is my failure of
I think the
probabilistic rationality that I'm not doing this right, but the proof of the second situation seems to be that I would exist if I took one box. I already exist.
I think the primary difference is that it feels like you haven't decided to only take one box yet. So it feels like you have some control over what's in the boxes.
In the second situation?
No, in the first situation. With Omega and the steel box, you haven't decided to take both or just one yet. And so it feels like you have control.
Right.
Even though you literally have no control. It's already been decided.
It's like
Yeah, but like in the second situation, it's like if you were to come to me and say, if you exist, you'll take one box. If you don't, you'll take neither, or you'll take both. And it's like, well, I'm hearing your proposal here. It sounds like to me like I exist.
feels like I exist.
Yeah.
But it's not literally that you if you exist or you don't exist. It's whether Prometheus predicted that you would and then implanted you into a womb or not, right? So you could be that one. So here's the thing. You are that one weird outlier, right? Prometheus was wrong this one time out of 1,000.
I guess so.
And so you exist in a world where people like you are extremely rare. Almost everybody else is a different type of human.
I'm unique, just like everyone else.
Right. Well, there's,
Not in this scenario.
yeah, there's some other people out there like you, but because of that, your chances of having existed initially are much more, and people like you are very rare in this world.
I'm okay with this so far.
Okay. I mean, that's basically it. There's going to be less people like you going forward as well. You're still okay with that.
I would like there to be more people like me, but that's I'm not lost yet. I get more confused in the subsequent parts of this post.
Yeah,
so.
I think it's just it's like I hate to use these words, I guess, but it's kind of a stupid question. It's like, or it almost feels like it was intended to nerd snipe philosophers.
It nerd sniped the fuck out of me.
Because, like, so the fact that this paradox presupposes a perfect predictor
Or nearly
means that the
perfect
chooser isn't actually free to choose, but simultaneously it presumes that you can debate about this. So, like, sort of the real debate there is, I don't know, it's a silly question. It's like, okay, this perfect predictor comes and says, make a choice, and I already know which choice you're going to make, but you still get to make it. So, like, do you or don't you get to make the choice? The question says that both, or it doesn't, like, say which universe you're living in.
I personally would like...
So that's what you're arguing about, just a contradictory question that actually is pretty nonsensical.
I mean, so this goes back a lot to... Remember a long time ago, we had this talk about the quantum multiverses thing, and various stupid risks we've taken, and we're like, wow, I bet in 9 out of 10 universes I died doing that, and there's much less of me now.
I had this, for memory refresher, I had this like independent realization of this thing, and then years later stumbled across the term quantum immortality.
Okay.
And that's what this is that you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, sort of, yes. Yeah,
well,
yeah,
the memory, not the current situation, but like what you're reminding us of.
Right, yeah. But, I mean, do you still have that intuition that when you did those risky things, in many universes you probably died, and so there's less of you spread across universes now?
I suppose.
Does that worry you or bother you at all?
In like some abstract sense, to the extent that I can emotionally connect at all with parallel universes, I feel a little like diminished. Like there are fewer versions of me across time spaces.
Yeah.
But not in a way that I actually find myself caring about.
Okay, so you would continue to take that 9 out of 10 risk because you figure you're going to live through it anyway, so who cares?
It's kind of like, I don't buy lottery tickets.
Yeah.
Even though if I did, one of me would win. Or in fact, a bunch of me would win, because multiverse, right?
Yes,
if I was the kind of person
you would lose
who
more money on net across universes than you win due to the odds.
But that's because I don't care about the other Stevens in other universes. If I did, I'd be like, I'll throw away $5 a year to make one of me rich. Maybe it'll be me, right? But I don't think it'll be me.
On net, you're making all of you poorer, though. Because one of you would get an extra, $100 million. But on net, all of you has lost $100 million because you spent $200 million playing.
This reminds
one of you
me.
$100
But the difference is like $5 to me is effectively nothing.
Okay. So
And
it's
so
like
I've-
death versus torture.
I've
You would
actually,
choose
Yeah.
torture.
I've actually lost nothing.
Okay.
Whereas
That was
like,
what I was just thinking
yeah.
of. The whole like problems with utilitarianism, where you assume that Eudolon's sort of, like.
that 2 Eudolons is exactly twice as good as 1.
Well, more that sort of, everybody having a mild annoyance versus one person being tortured actually weighs out in favor of, like, well, we should let the one person be tortured. But it's like the one consciousness is experiencing all the torture, while all the other consciousnesses the Eudolons are dispersed.
So why don't you blow $5 a year on lottery tickets?
I apparently don't care that much about alternate universe Stevens.
There's so many other choices that if you believed in this, like, again, repugnant conclusions and whatever, there's so many other things you'd have to do if you thought that this mattered.
I kind of think it matters.
Yeah.
Kinda. Not
You probably don't
not a
behave as
lot,
though it
but
does,
also
though.
not zero either. I don't know.
The top comment in this summarizes my thoughts on this really well. Just the first sentence.
Wait, can I bring it back real quick as to why I was asking about the quantum thing?
Yeah.
Because basically, when you're doing that thing, that causes, you to die in 9 out of 10 other multiverses, when you choose to take both boxes here when you're talking to Prometheus, that means that out of every 1,000 universes, you have now restricted you to only exist in one of them out of the other, out of 1,000. Whereas before, you would have existed in 999 out of 1,000. Now it's the opposite. You only exist in 1 out of 1,000 universes because he's almost always correct, and you have just drastically shrunken your probability space of existing across universes, even though you do exist in this one empirically.
You really steelmanned this argument, because I don't think he got into anything like that sort of stuff. Yeah, so put that way, it really makes sense that I would take one box, because I'd want all of me to take one box.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, if they all already exist, and they're all making this decision, their decisions won't retroactively make any of us not exist.
No, but it will make it so that all those people do exist. Yeah, but they exist at 1/1000th the
rate that they
thickness,
could have.
The rate, yeah.
It's not just do they exist, though, but do they have free will?
I'm less concerned about that. But yeah, the just the sentence, because you said it was silly, Jace. I like this way of phrasing it. It's nicer and maybe less nice at the same time. Ultimately, it's a silly, perfect example of how some people can be so sharp that they cut themselves.
That is exactly what I was trying to get at. Well done, that commenter.
It's Eris Katsaris. The comment is 11 years old.
It seems like it would be really funny to come up with paradoxes like these and sort of just, like, roll them up and put them in, like, a little beanbag and then just throw them into a philosopher's convention.
Because, like, the thing is
It
with...
feels like what a lot of Less Wrong was about
Yes.
for a number of years. Yeah.
I think it continues to sometimes be about this.
If I was the kind of person to buy lottery tickets to possibly benefit other alternate Stevens, I'd be very susceptible to Pascal's muggings,
Right.
right?
I mean, you also might be susceptible to quantum suicide to win the lotto.
Right, and I'm not inclined to do that.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just too laid back about it, but I don't know. It's I had a background thought. I think it was before I even read these, that like we can do an episode at some point like what is a rationalist? Mm-hmm. Because is a rationalist is a
revisiting episode 1? Oh boy,
we should revisit it every 200 episodes or so.
Episode 1 was what is rationality?
Okay,
not what is a rationalist.
Okay, wasn't episode 2 or 3 like what do you tell your grandma when she asks what is a rationalist? Something like that.
I think it was when she asked what rationality is.
Okay.
Because I'm curious what a rationalist is. Is a rationalist a person who? Am I not a rationalist because I don't find this a compelling quandary?
No, there's quandaries I don't find compelling.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll dive into that maybe at length if there's anything there worth discussing another time. But I'm just like I find myself like I don't lose any sleep over this problem, right?
Okay.
If I was in the situation, I would anguish. This would be so weird. But now it's I'm good.
Do you have, real quick, any thoughts about the whole quantum thickness thing? How much of you exists across the multiverse? Or do you not even bother with multiversal?
I can't know.
Sure, but if this Prometheus thing existed, you would know that your answer greatly affects how...
But it doesn't. Someone made it up. It's a thought experiment.
Right, I know. And entertain the thought experiment. If it was real, do you... Not even this situation, like just in general, do you bother... do you put any stock in how much of you there is across the multiverses?
Now you're making me really think about it. So I sort of think that maybe a more important question there is how important do I think I am to like the grand scheme of things? Where sort of, I don't know. I think that like,
I don't know if
first of all, I can't know this, and then like, secondly, like, even if I can't really do very much about it. I don't think that there is actually a huge amount of free will. Like, especially a lot of the decisions I made in my life were just when I was young and based on outside forces. So, and then there's, butterfly effects, sort of chaotic things, quantum randomness or whatever that's going to change the way things happen anyway. So how much can you really control? It seems like it's not really worth agonizing over. You
don't have any emotional investment of more of you existing than less?
Kind of not really. I mean, again, I don't think that I'm that important. Like, I like existing, and like, but the universe is cool and other people are cool too, and...
I mean, I don't think I'm that important either, but the I like existing thing is a really strong motivator for me.
Yeah, and, evolution sort of dictates that that's the case, but then also you got a vasectomy, right?
I did, which is going to come into play here when we get to the third part of this post.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, wait, the third part of... You mean the next article, or...
Well, the next article too, but specifically the third part of this post.
Okay, we should probably do that then, because...
Okay.
Wait, there's more.
There's more, yes. All right, so for those people who are like me and who think it's obvious you only take one box to maximize your chances of existing and to be in as many possible quantum worlds as you can be, there is the trap that is sprung here. And he did say before he springs the trap that, like, many of you are smart and have already seen through this trap, so this doesn't apply to you. But I didn't, because I'm not that smart.
Me either. For what it's worth.
Okay, but you didn't fall into the trap. You just didn't find the bait appealing.
The bait didn't catch me. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to read this part, Stephen?
No, you guys go ahead.
You weren't created by Prometheus. You were created by Azathoth, the god that is evolution by natural selection. You are the product of an ongoing optimization process that is trying to maximize reproductive fitness.
Gasp.
Azathoth wants you to maximize your number of descendants. If you fail to have descendants, Azathoth will try to not have created you. If your intelligence reduces your reproduction rate, Azathoth will try not to grant you intelligence.
Womp womp.
It would seem then that any decision theory that demands that you one box also demands that you try to maximize your reproductive fitness. Which really fucked me up.
Oops.
Because, Prometheus isn't deciding whether to create me or not based on whether I'm going to one box or two box. Prometheus is deciding whether to create me or not based on whether he thinks I am going to continue to spread my genes in the next generation and have a lot more of them. And that means that if I'm trying to one box to maximize my chances of existing, I should have multiple children at the very least.
See, that makes no sense to me.
How is that not a direct corollary to one boxing with the Prometheus problem?
Well, maybe it's because I wasn't sold on the first part of the thought experiment.
But, I mean, even if you weren't sold on it, it's a direct corollary. And you're just like, haha, I managed to avoid that trap because I didn't one box.
But you already exist. Evolution is not going to make your existence less likely depending on whether or not you have kids.
Right. Same with Prometheus. You already exist.
and that's why I wasn't worried about it. That's why I two-boxed in the Prometheus problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I
was totally worried about it because I would like to maximize my chances of existing.
But you realize that no amount of kids you have will have any impact on whether or not you were born.
It might.
Do I realize that?
But it might have an impact on how many people like Inuyasha exist in the future.
It will have an impact
How
on
much
that.
Inuyashness there is in that.
Yeah, but that's a separate question.
It also really defects against people like me in the past who the only reason I'm around is because they decided to have more kids, and if I don't continue that, I am decreasing the chances of me having been born.
It is kind of like
No, you're
interesting
not.
that IQ...
Yes, I am!
Well, it is kind of interesting that high IQ tends to anti-correlate with having children. Or a lot of rationalists are like antinatalists.
I think that's actually a completely separate reason.
Well,
I think that's where we get into IQ shredders, which we can talk about later. Like in the past, high IQ people had a lot of children, and we can get to that when we get to that. But I do think that this is a quandary for me, or it was at least when I read it, and I came up with my own answer, and then I was looking through my comments, and I was like, oh hey, this is the same answer I gave 15 years ago. So at least I'm consistent. But
that's good.
Yeah.
I didn't dig far enough in the comments to find yours.
But, you know.
So you'll probably get along with the multiple versions of yourself.
Well, 15 years ago, I was convinced by the answer, and now it feels like I'm grasping at straws, and I'm not convinced by the answer at all. I think my answer is closer to something like what Stephen's been saying, that Azathoth made a mistake and created me, and here I am, and I'm not going to change my existence by not breeding. And I can't even, like, in a multiverse... like in the quantum multiverse with Prometheus, it makes sense that I am maximizing my existence among multiverses by choosing to one box. But in a quantum multiverse with Azathoth, I'm not even maximizing my existence by making children because Azathoth doesn't predict based on that. It just, reproduces the genes that reproduce themselves.
Does it help if you reframe that as just giving the finger to Azathoth?
No.
And like taking a sacrifice, like... sacrificing yourself to give God two big middle fingers.
Gosh, I like thinking it that way because I would hope that's what I would do in real life if there was a real God.
There we go.
Yeah.
We fixed it. We solved it.
Damn it. Stop fixing things.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Well, don't you want to feel better about this?
No. If I wanted to feel better about things, I wouldn't read rationalist stuff.
I 100%
just take
disagree.
Lots of drugs.
I think that you can feel better about understanding things as they actually are and being rational, but
that's true.
So here's Yudkowsky's reply to this. Azathoth wants you, he's quoting, Azathoth wants you to maximize your number of descendants. If you fail to have descendants, Azathoth will try not to have created you. That seems to be what's tripping you up, right?
I mean, not really. What's tripping me up is the direct corollary to Prometheus, where that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense with Azathoth, since Azathoth doesn't try anything. It's just a description of a natural process, like a description of gravity that we're anthropomorphizing.
That's basically what Yudkowsky says.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's like he says the quote, and then he says, but this seems merely false. Azathoth doesn't just creates descendants whose ancestors reproduced. Azathoth isn't exerting any sort of foresight as to whether or not you reproduce. I can't figure out who or what you're trying to trade with. Not having children simply does not make you retroactively less likely to have existed.
Right. Where it would with Prometheus, but it doesn't with Azathoth.
Right. So in the first part one, in this bizarre, out there thought experiment, imagine a perfectly spherical Hitler in a vacuum. Like, that's fine. But when you try to extrapolate to pointing at nature that we can all go look at, it's like that's the nice fun, mental masturbation thought experiment falls apart.
Yeah. I think it definitely works in the case of Prometheus, and then it falls apart with Azathoth because Azathoth is not actually a predictor. It's the result of natural processes, which have certain results that we can
They don't have
see
wants.
and correlate. Yeah.
Like
There's no predicting happening. There's just the results of what has been weeded out and what does a lot of boinking.
Yeah, Yudkowsky finishes this comment by saying, I suppose you could be in a Newcomb-like situation with your parents making a similar decision to have birthed you. I don't see how you could be in one with respect to Azathoth/evolution. It's not modeling you. It doesn't contain a computation similar to you. There's no logical update on what it does after you know your own decision.
I will say my parents are definitely disappointed that only my sister has reproduced.
Yeah, I was going to say on that note, have either of your parents ever pulled the whole I brought you into this world, I can take you out argument? Because
No, they God, there was...
They're welcome to try.
I don't remember what I saw. Maybe it was, it must have been some kind of animated thing. Yes, it was a recent Rick and Morty episode.
Of course it was.
Yeah, with the, I brought you into this world, I can take you out, and Jerry thought that this was like an actual law or something, and Beth was like,
Oh, yeah.
No!
I just saw
Just
that
'cause
one.
I gave birth to someone doesn't mean I can legally kill them.
Well, you say that all the time when the kids misbehave. She's like, wait, you actually thought that it's not a law.
He's like, how can you joke about murdering your children? It was
It's
a
good.
great beat. Love that show. But getting back to all this. My parents are definitely disappointed about that. My dad really wanted grandchildren and didn't get very many of them.
How many would he want? My parents have 2. I feel like that's plenty.
So in theory,
I feel like they retired by having 3 kids.
In theory, you would want 4 grandchildren.
Sure.
At a minimum. Like, ideally more than that, but at a minimum, replacement rate would be 4 grandchildren. If you only have 2 grandchildren, you are weeding yourself out of the population, you are failing.
I wonder if you poll humans and ask them how many grandchildren would you like?
Oh, infinite. The thing about grandchildren is you get all the benefits of having a cute, fun kid and none of the costs, because you already paid all the costs when you had the original kids.
It's like having a friend that has a dog.
That's
that you
exactly
get
what I was
babysit
gonna say.
sometimes. Yeah, we're on the same page here. I actually want to Google how many grandchildren do people want, because they've probably polled people.
And I doubt the answer is as many as possible.
I would say bare minimum of 8.
I'm curious what the, and I'm sure there's data. Maybe we can't find like the best survey during the episode, but I'm sure it's out there.
Maybe by the time you get to about 20 grandchildren, they start blurring together and you don't care as much, but I would say minimum 8.
And it probably depends too on how many kids you had. Maybe there's too many variables with the kinds of people, like my wife's a single child. Mm-hmm. If you're from a Catholic family that has 11 kids, they probably want a minimum of 50 grandkids.
Right.
So there's probably going to be variability based on what kind of person you are / parent you were, right?
Yeah.
Huh. Well,
what does it say?
I'm not finding anything. Maybe I just need to mess with my search terms. This is bad audio though. I did find though that the average number of grandchildren is 5 to 6.
Okay.
And because of divorce and remarriage, many children have 6 to 8 adults in the grandparent role in their lives.
Interesting.
So going by, I guess, revealed preference, 5 to 6. 10.
Okay. Is that worldwide, I'm assuming?
Let's see. This is from the legacyproject.org, which doesn't say... Oh, it's American.
Oh, okay.
Probably not representative. Americans are weird.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I mean, there's cool stuff on here, but that's, we're going down into a rabbit hole. It's the wrong one.
For what it's worth, my original answer was that I am more concerned with my memes than my genes, because I want people who are like me intellectually, who think like me, who believe like me, and so I would rather spend energy passing those on rather than my genes, because I, at the time, saw my parents, and I saw me, and I saw how different we were, and I assumed that they were very disappointed by how much I'm not like them, and I don't want what they want, and honestly, that was a major motivation for not having kids of my own. I'm like, God, I saw what my parents got when they had 4 kids. I don't want to get that same kind of deal where I spend all this energy and money and life and sweat and worry making kids, and then they're like these things that are so alien for me that I don't even want to spend much time with them.
That's why you have one, so you can just dedicate full time to indoctrinating that one.
I don't know.
I found Eneasz sub 2010's answers.
Okay.
I would zero box so that I could exist twice.
I did say that.
Similar to my answer, if somebody comes to you holding 2 boxes, nope the fuck out of there.
Actually, in seriousness, I consider people who are mimetically similar but genetically dissimilar to me to be closer to me than those who are genetically similar but mimetically dissimilar. The point you just remembered making from
Very
11
consistent.
years ago.
All right.
Yeah. So I'd rather increase my mimetic reproduction at the cost of genetic reproduction. Yeah, nailed it.
But
I think that... And that actually makes sense. The parts of me I care about aren't the parts of me that my genes, quote unquote, care about, right? I want people to have my dispositions and attitudes towards whatever, nature, each other, whatever, more than I care about, if I could give everyone, one salient meme from my mind, and if I could do that, or give everyone a gene from me, it's not even a trade-off.
No,
right?
It's not.
Yeah.
But you don't give your kids one gene from you, you give them half. And the other half of their genes are from someone you have selected. that, have a lot of genes you like anyway. I mean, that was my answer, and still the answer I desperately cling to now. When I was in my early mid-20s, but now, first of all, I've been exposed to a lot of both research and writing about how much genes matter and how little mimetic influence matters. Specifically, Brian Kaplan wrote that whole thing about how your children turn out really doesn't matter all that much as to what you do with them. They're going to turn out as long as you don't neglect or abuse them.
I find that really weird. I think that there must be something off in the research that shows that parenting basically doesn't matter. It clearly must
as long
matter
as you
to some
don't
extent.
neglect or abuse them.
Yeah, I don't know.
I still feel like I knew kids in school who were savants, not quite savants. That would be they would succeed no matter what. They were geniuses, and they had nurturing home environments. I feel like if their home environments were just basic, they weren't abused, they weren't neglected, but neither did they have a science fiction collection or educational games or whatever. Mm-hmm. If at home all they did was just watch cartoons like I did, I feel like they would have succeeded less. But that could just be my intuition.
Yeah. Before the early modern era, the before the 50s or so, all kids were raised like that, right? The parents were just kind of run outside, do your thing, and yet we still had
go work in this factory.
Yeah, we still had Einsteins and von Neumanns and shit.
Yeah. And I think maybe that my intuition is wrong there. My intuition there could just be wrong, and that's just why this research is surprising. I think there's something, there's always headlines, parents who read to their kids, the kids turn out way better. But it's that's just because the kind of parents who spend time reading with their kids
barely passed on the good reading genes.
Yeah.
Well, or they have more time to dedicate to their kids. That seems to imply that parenting does something.
Okay.
Right?
I don't know.
The difference between a kid succeeding and not isn't whether or not you read them Harry Potter, right? One chapter a night for several years.
It's whether you're the kind of person who would do that, which probably is a lot determined by your genes.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, my sister's a different kind of parent than my parents were.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah.
She's got, 15 years to go before first one's 18, so.
I think my sister is radically different from all the rest of us. So she's the worst example because she's the only one that's reproducing, but she's also the one that is the most different. So that sucks. I have become more and more convinced that actually my parents' upbringing me didn't seem to matter that much because it turned out my dad was a secret atheist all along, which fucking blew my mind when I found that out. And I was like, really? And all that indoctrination, and you didn't want it to happen, and somehow it managed to not happen. And just seeing how much I've become similar to them, despite the fact that I, found myself very dissimilar to them and really not liking them at all in my early years. I'm like, God, are these genes just slowly taking me over? Is everything they said about genes correct?
I
Seems
suspect...
like a chicken and egg problem, kind of.
Fucking chickens.
Are all of your siblings also atheists?
Except for my sister.
The outlier.
Exactly.
Yeah, my sample size
the one
is
that's reproducing.
My sample size is too skewed. Or my sample, I've got my sister who's basically 2 years older, and then my clone and I. Mm-hmm. So we're not, our data's weird anyway, so, yeah. I don't know. It'd be interesting to be able to run experiments where my brother and I each had one kid and see how those kids turn out, especially if they never met. We pre-commit to not seeing each other for 30 years, go off, have families, and then let our kids meet and see if they both saw, I don't know, Avengers 15 on opening weekend, right?
Natural versions of this experiment have been done where, 2 twins were adopted by different parents and never knew that they shared the same parents, and then found each other years later. And I think actually they did have quite similar outcomes a lot of the time.
I definitely saw the things because I enjoyed following this research back when I had ready or access to it, because since I've been a baby, I've participated in twin studies, longitudinal ones where we're in the group where we were raised in similar environments, and we're identical twins. Fraternal twins are another good data point for this. But I feel like all the ones that I saw that were documentary style things or made it into the paragraphs in my psych books, I feel like they wouldn't put the boring cases in there. They put the fun ones, right? The fun ones is like,
I think
look.
they put the representative ones of the data. Well, okay, that's assuming that they're doing good science journalism.
I was going to say, I would like to believe that, but I don't. I'm sus about that. I'm thinking like, okay, yeah. So you showed me the example that wow, they were both wearing blue shirts when they happened to meet the same day, and they both married blondes. Like weird, right? And both had leather straps on their watches rather than metal or cloth or whatever. Like it. I can't believe your genes dictate what kind of watch strap you would enjoy, right? And I'm using that as a hyperbole example, but the blondes and I think the shirt color was one example that did happen. The blonde wives, I mean. But, I don't know what color their mom's hair was, right? Maybe their mom was blonde. I don't know. Maybe even the adopted mom, if they were separated at birth. Who knows?
It's not really that hard to imagine that liking blondes might be something that's at least somewhat genetically disposed. Plus, there's 4 or 5 hair colors.
I think that
it's not that unusual. Forget 2 people with blonde.
I think all humans tend to prefer blondes because in the ancestral environment it was really rare.
I disagree because I don't prefer blondes. So there.
I was just going to make a joke.
I am a human.
I was going to say
I prefer women who are into me.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you like me? Oh, what color is your hair? Great. That's less important. Yeah.
I mean, you did say all humans, so.
Well, I meant on average.
Ah.
And also I'm being tongue-in-cheek here.
Okay. So.
Gentlemen prefer blondes.
Wasn't.
That was a Marilyn Monroe movie, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's. God. I hate that because it just smacks of such shitty propaganda.
Well, the thing that I always
Gentlemen
find really
prefer
funny
blondes,
about it is that it's this rare gene that everybody dyes their hair blonde to try to so we're just increasing the amount of blondes.
It's not even all that rare, is it?
In naturally, yeah, especially because a lot of kids born blonde, their hair darkens over time. I was born blonde. My hair is now blue. Really? It's not naturally blue. It's naturally sort of the same color as Steven's, actually. Kind of a
Auburn.
dirty blonde.
Yeah.
Actually, my mom insisted on calling it dishwater blonde.
Ew.
Because I
your
used to
mom's
say
a
it's
jerk.
gray. And I was like, no, how is dishwater blonde better than gray? It's gray.
Yeah.
Gray is a neutral word. That just sounds like it's got bacteria in it or something.
Right? Dishwater is something you throw out and try to keep the baby from going out with it.
So the part 2 opens with a couple of examples that
Which part 2?
of the you are inside Newcomb's
Okay.
box, and so these I think fell flat for me because they're just bad answers. So all right, question: why does a knife have a handle? Answer: this allows you to grasp it without cutting yourself.
That is the correct answer.
Right, but he says that's an acausal answer that is speaking backwards from the present.
I mean,
And
the
it's
way he puts it, it sounds like he's saying knives reproduce, which they don't.
Yeah, knives didn't evolve or anything. They're not rocks. Humans made them.
Yeah.
He says, these kinds of answers are highly compelling, but strictly speaking, they're allowing events in the future to influence events in the past. And I'm like, I strongly disagree.
Well, you forgot about the eyebrows.
You've completely
one.
lost me.
I think events in the future can influence events in the past when the person in the past is a human thinking about the future.
Right.
How could I
I'm
best
imagining
make a cutting utensil without cutting myself?
So that actually works great. Good point. That's like Nick Cage in Next. It's like, all right, so I'm gonna make a knife and I'm gonna cut dinner with it. Okay, well if I make it all one blade, I imagine it very easily ruining my life. So I'm gonna make a dull part that I can hold on to. Perfect. So but that all happens before the future. You imagine a possible outcome and change your behavior or your invention
or you do, in
based
fact,
on that.
as a hunter-gatherer, smash a flint stone. You get a nice sharp edge, and you're like, yeah, this will be really good for, skinning deer. And then you immediately pick it up and cut yourself, and you're like, shit.
God damn it. I'm too much like a deer.
It's like I need to put something around this.
The second question is less about maybe because it doesn't involve foresight. Why do I have eyebrows? And the answer that the author gives: eyebrows help keep rain and sweat from running down your forehead and getting into your eyes.
And I think this is a qualitatively different question than why do knives have handles, because knives were created with foresight, whereas eyebrows were like the creatures that had eyebrows had less sweat getting in their eyes and therefore reproduced more often.
Because eyebrows evolved,
Yeah,
and knives didn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. And as long as we're in absurd land here, imagine a universe in which knives did evolve. And the selectors are people who use them, right? So their fitness is determined by how good they are being knives.
Symbiotic sentient knives.
We would select the ones that didn't cut us when we used them. We'd select the ones with duller and duller parts of it until you get a nice, comfortable grip wooden handle, right?
Well, I mean, that does kind of go back to imagine a world where humans did evolve. The ones that reproduced more often would be the ones to evolve
Yeah.
to show up in the future.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
I just
So
I
if
don't.
you'd like to show up in the future, I guess, doesn't particularly make a lot of sense.
So that's exactly the same sort of like not worried about it that I have with Prometheus killing, because Prometheus explicitly won't kill me if I tick both boxes.
Yeah.
Evolution won't wipe me out from the timeline if I don't have kids.
So
right?
it was around this time, back when I was, having my deep thoughts and maybe drinking too much.
Those two things might have been related. Maybe not.
I mean, you can do one without the other, and most people do. Whether you do one or the other is up to you. But I kind of had this idea, and I'm still not sure how strongly I feel about it, that there's, I don't know, not that many people in the world. There's maybe 100 people, maybe 1,000 at most, and everyone is just slight variations on those people. And like, you have your own consciousness. Like, you don't share consciousness or memories or anything, but like an AI that was trying to categorize people might be like, okay, there's roughly 1,000 people in the world, and everyone is just a slightly modified instantiation of one of those 1,000 people.
Like cars.
Yeah. And in that case, I would like there to be a lot more of me in the world, even if I don't share memories or experiences with other me's. I think that would be a good thing.
I think it would too, because it seems like you get along with yourself, so we'd probably have a less strife-filled world if there were just more Eniash clones running around. But like,
Oh yeah,
you
heard it, future people. Have more of me around. Unfreeze me and clone me.
Preferentially. I sort of, though, kind of fall back on the same thing of I don't think I'm that important. Like, I mean, obviously I think I'm kind of cool, but I also think other people are cool, and like diversity's good, so shrug. Maybe that's why I don't care that much about that.
I don't know what the word important there is doing. Because like, I think you're important.
By which I mean, like, I feel like that there should be more me-like people in the future, preferential to other types of people.
I think that if I got to pick among like this 1,000-line distribution or whatever, all the prototypical humans, I'd pick more like you than I'd pick some other brands, right?
I guess, would you like to exist?
Preferentially, yeah.
Like, if there's only like 1,000 people with
I'm
variations, then maybe in another few thousand years, basically someone identical to you could exist again, and that would be pretty cool, right?
Maybe, I don't know, or maybe somebody else would exist and they'd be cool too.
Well, yeah, but if that somebody else was almost identical to you because of there only being like 1,000 basic templates, then you're selecting to have more of you in the future by reproducing more.
I think there's not only a few basic templates. People seem to actually be quite different from each other in a lot of important ways.
No.
Yeah, I like where that kind of thought pump is coming from, but I don't know how closely it maps. Like, it's the kind of thing where if you zoom out, yeah, there's like, and not just like in physical distance, but like on how much you abstract the person. Yeah, how many, if I'm going to pick the top 10 things about the person, like the, how you can see your values and your soul and worth the candle.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that most people have, or maybe there's a strong concentration of what people put in their top 10 values. And maybe that's just distributed across different species. So, maybe the Tung have these top 10 more or less on average than the dwarves, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you do that for humans, that could be the case, but I'm with Jace that the other 10,000 values people have will vary too much and make a unique, person.
I think it's important for our success as a species that we have that diversity too. Like, there's a bunch of weird nerds who obsessed about one thing their entire lives, and that's why we have like discovered most of the elements that we have, or
Yeah.
Standing on the shoulders of giants is how sort of we've got to where we are now. And if we were all more similar to each other,
were all giant nerds.
they were indeed. And then also, like awesome like barbarian warriors and whatnot. Like,
Yeah, they didn't contribute much.
You need all types.
They kept the giant nerds safe, I guess.
Usually they enslaved the giant nerds and took their stuff. Fuck jocks.
Was there a part 3 to this?
No, that was
thing?
it. I mean, the part 3 was the Azathoth, switching out Azathoth for Prometheus.
Okay.
Which is where I think it falls apart.
Yeah.
I do think that...
There was the anticipated responses. Sorry, is that what you were just talking about?
No, although we should get into that. I was going to quickly say that I do think, like, memes mean a lot. Even if there was basically an identical me that lived 1,000 years ago, his mimetic, milieu, the mimetic environment he grew up in is a big deal. So I also like to keep memes going, and I think that's part of the reason we do this podcast, to keep the rationality memes out there and hopefully spreading to more people.
I think people have many people have a desire to just broadcast their thoughts.
Because it makes other people more like you if you can convince them that your thoughts are good and they should cooperate with you, right?
Hold my works, ye mighty.
Yeah, something like that.
But just let's be more like each other and
For
cooperate.
None of his works surved, right?
Yeah,
like that was the thing. It was
That
like
is the
behold
thing.
my works, and it was just like a slab, and then there was sort of like a blasted desert scape, and it's like whoops. I bet they were really great, man.
And I think the other aspect is like, I don't know, maybe you find people that share your interests or something. But since I started doing this podcast like 5 years ago, I haven't touched Facebook, right? I haven't tweeted. This outlet every other week is satisfies my itch completely to like shoot my ideas out there. So I scream my ideas to the internet 2 hours 2 hours every 2 weeks, and that satisfies it. So I have no compulsion whatsoever to like comment
Shoot
on
your
Reddit.
semen out there as well.
One thing that's been really fun is the really fun, kind of in scare quotes, like sort of mean it and sort of it's a bit weird, but when people like a friend from Japan visited a couple of times Denver, and they knew Phoenix from the Bayesian conspiracy, not the University of Bayes. Shout out to Raj, who I'm sure, actually I think I asked whether it was okay if I use your name, but like came to Japan, we hung out, and it was like the kind of person who is in University of Bayes is probably the kind of person who like Bayesian conspiracy who I would get along with. I do actually want to have kids still, but like it's just not been the right circumstances yet, and so like I kind of want CRISPR babies to be a thing.
Yeah.
It's like the weird sort of like, I don't know, the calculus of the window of fertility's closing. I'm about to be 35. But then also maybe medical science will get good, and then maybe also we can have artificial wombs so I don't have to deal with the whole carrying thing and then it becoming a weird brain parasite, which I kind of don't love.
I really love the whole artificial wombs thing, but I also like worry about what the...
Even C-sections kind of mess kids up. They're like...
Oh, yeah?
Immunity is worse because they don't travel through the vagina, which has all the like gut flora or the vagina flora that get passed. They're supposed to get passed on to the baby.
Okay. I worry more about like the whole emotional bonding connection thing. I think that's one of the reasons that like moms just tend to have a deeper emotional connection than dads. And also the same reason that I didn't think it would be a great idea for Amaryllis to be under a blanket for 9 months.
Sort of imagining like the artificial womb is just like this sack that you put a strap on and kind of carry around like a laptop bag. So you could still like, play Baby Einstein videos to it or whatever. But like...
They kind of have that in the game Death Stranding.
Oh, God.
I don't quite get what the mechanic was there. I never played that game because it looked terrible. Like, the trailers and like the promotion for the game looked amazing. It was like Norman Reedus mocap, and it looked surreal and weird. And then the entire thing was just like this weird FedEx thing where you're just carrying a bunch of like janky boxes that don't stack well, and it turned out to be like virtually unplayable.
Also, isn't like a big part of human bonding going through shitty ass experiences with each other? Like that's one of the reasons army guys are so close together. Like I've heard pregnancy sucks shit. And nobody wants to go through that, but then you like form this bond with the thing that you went through a lot of shit through.
I don't, but I kind of do. I think Katrina said the same thing on the podcast way back in the day where
I really want to get her on for the podcast for a pregnancy episode.
Oh, I think you did one already, but like you could see if she's still consistent after however many years.
No, I want to get one because she was never on after she got pregnant.
Oh, yeah, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Like, sort of, that's almost one of the reasons I went on hormones, though, is just like, bodies can do cool stuff. I kind of want to do weird experiments on myself.
I'm just saying, if you want to have kids, you should definitely like get as close physically to Arnold Schwarzenegger as you can, because there was that movie where he had a baby.
Oh yeah, that turned out really good, right?
All right, so anything else on this before we move on to a Hugh Shredder?
I had fun with it. It was, to me, mental masturbation is not a pejorative.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I like masturbating all kinds of ways.
That's right.
I do kind of want to read the anticipated responses real quick, though, at the end.
Sure.
Where let me see if I can summarize. We're not in the ancestral environment, so there's no logical entanglement between my actions and my existence. To which the person says, well, we are in the environment of some of our ancestors. Evolution hasn't stopped.
No. We're in the ancestral environment of our descendants, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, not our descendants. Wait, what?
No, I think Jay's quoted it correctly, but what you're saying makes more sense. It's like we are in a ancestral environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's not what the author said. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, it was like my ancestors weren't exposed to the same memes, which they say can be defeated by adding Your ancestors could have thought themselves out of having children. Anti-reproduction memes have existed throughout history. There's probably always been a tension between kin selection and morality. The next point was my favorite. This is a decision-theoretic basilisk. In the unlikely event that it's right, I'm worse off for having read it.
Mm-hmm.
To which they say, well, only if you're thinking causally, in which case this whole idea is meaningless.
Dope.
And then, Azathoth doesn't really exist. You can't trade with a non-sapient phenomenon. And,
I think that was directly brought up.
yeah, replace the sapient opponent with a non-sapient phenomenon in any of our thought experiments. Do you refuse to negotiate with physical laws? Then if you're so smart, why ain't you rich? And finally,
okay.
So how exactly are you urging me to behave? I want you to refute this essay! Exclamation point. Lol.
Well, I'm not sure we refuted it, but we tried.
I think I mostly did.
Okay.
I
don't know
don't
if I did it
feel
well.
Yeah, I
Maybe
don't.
we dissolved it rather than refuted it.
Yeah, like Peter Singer's 1975
Sorry.
essay, Famine, Affluence, and Morality. People, I think, have a strong compulsion to refute that because it basically says you should give until you're like living at poverty levels.
Yeah.
And
I don't think that's sustainable.
well, yes, that's not sustainable. So that's one refutation. But even so, you take the weaker version, which is you should give plenty of money. People like, I guess what I'm saying is that I didn't refute that, so I do donate money, right? This one, I don't know if I had to refute it. I just wasn't sold on it. So like,
Okay.
I bought Singer's argument and was compelled by it. This one, there's nothing for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
If I
At least not the way it's presented.
yeah, if it was trying to convince me of something, it would be that I should have kids.
Yeah, maybe it was trying to convince you to refute.
To refute it.
Well, to refute it, and to why acausal trading might not always make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things that don't make sense, I want you to help me understand the next post.
See, I think this next one makes a lot more sense and actually makes a good case for why people who listen to this podcast should have lots of kids.
Okay.
Okay. So this next one is the IQ shredder, which is a concept that's been around for, I don't know, a number of years, I think. It first was articulated as a post that was a comment to something about Singapore. And I think Singapore is probably the strongest individual example of an IQ shredder, so that's what we're going to use, but I think it can apply to various places in the US as well in a less extreme form. Anyways, what is an IQ shredder? An IQ shredder is a place that has a level of civilization and social order that's really attractive to talented and competent people. In common parlance, perhaps, high IQ people want to go to these places because they provide them a great life that they can have by using their IQ in things that that place wants to use their IQ for, such as, intellectually demanding jobs.
Yeah, I would say like conscientious high IQ people. I think that's what they were getting at with talent.
Yeah.
I know lots of dysfunctional high IQ people.
Right, yes.
I am one, you might say.
This place also has an immigration policy that is unapologetically selective, i.e. first-order eugenic, meaning that it primarily admits high IQ people and tries to keep out people without the high IQ, or, like you were saying, talented and competent people who have a lot of...
Smart, hardworking folk.
Yes,
that
conscientious.
Don't have lots of vices. 'Cause
Right.
Singapore is weird about things like chewing gum.
Yeah. So these are places that are very attractive to these people and who preferentially let in those much more than people who don't have those traits. And finally, these places are ones that cause people to have reproductive rates well below replacement levels. Replacement level for reproduction is 2 children per... technically 2 children per couple, but that's kind of weird and hard to measure, especially because couples change over time. So basically, it's 2 children per woman is the normal reproductive rate. Singapore has a reproductive rate of 0.78 children per woman, which is way below reproduction. It basically means every generation you lose more than half your population and soon you stop existing. But Singapore does not actually lose more than half its population every generation. It
steals talent from elsewhere.
Exactly. It keeps importing high IQ Chinese and Indian people who maybe would have had a lot more children in the places they came from, but now that they're in Singapore have almost none. And so the effect of this is to draw in high IQ from its surroundings and then have those high IQ individuals not reproduce, resulting in a overall lowering of the IQ for the population over time. Thus the term IQ shredder. It makes your area dumber.
But that doesn't seem to be what's happening. I guess
Doesn't it?
maybe I spaced for a second. You use New Zealand or Netherlands as the country that
Singapore.
Sir.
Singapore.
Those other countries, I think, are sort of the opposite of IQ shredders.
I'm all right. So
Because Singapore is a single island nation that is one big city.
okay, so Singapore has low reproductive rate,
Yes.
but high IQ people and jobs and
Yes.
output. They keep that They sustain that by importing high IQ people.
Yes. It has very high standard of living, which is what attracts people who can, work in a city and use their high IQ to get that great standard of living.
I think it's also important that they have very strict laws and conservative social norms.
So I guess I'm not clear how they're an IQ shredder. They seem to be an IQ magnet.
Well, yes, that's
they're-
the point.
Yeah,
The IQ gets pulled into the city and then it does not reproduce. So
Okay, so when I picture IQ shredder, I picture IQ going down.
it does. It causes IQ to go down in the area.
But
Like,
you're
en
bringing
masse.
in the average. You're bringing in people to raise the average.
No. You bring in high IQ people to, I guess, yes, locally increase the average, maybe, but they don't reproduce. So all the high IQ genes get weeded out of the population.
But if you keep bringing them in,
Yeah, and you keep bringing them in. They keep not reproducing. You think there's an infinite amount of high IQ people in the general population?
as long as the rest of the population keeps reproducing, they'll randomly keep producing some variant of high IQ people.
The rest of the population will keep reproducing, and there will be some, genetic anomalies that causes IQ, some kids to have an IQ spike, but
That now I see the problem. That is not infinitely sustainable. The world
Yes.
could not be Singapore.
if you want to have more high IQ people, it's best to have your high IQ people reproduce because they are much more likely to have high IQ children.
It seems like one could spread their IQ more efficiently than having a handful of children.
Does it?
Yeah.
How?
If there's a genetic component, which there probably is, I think it's not too challenging to say. I could donate a bunch of if I had an IQ that people wanted to have, I could just donate sperm.
Okay,
Right?
well,
I could, in theory, inseminate many more women than I could ever sire those children.
do you think there's that many women out there that are looking to have lots of children with high IQ people that they aren't in relationships with?
Not necessarily, but there are people. As long as anyone's using the sperm from the sperm banks, maybe you just call that to.
The question isn't like that there's anyone doing it. There's obviously going to be some people who are average intellect who have genius children, just because that's how genetics works. There's the random freak variations. The problem is that on average, it's still going to go down unless there's a lot of women doing a lot of that. The average IQ is going to keep dropping as the high IQ people get weeded out of the population. It's like if you were to take a city that you only allow tall people into. You have to be
like
above
the Netherlands. Just kidding. That's just the genetic.
you have to be over 6 feet tall to get into the city. But if you do get into the city, you get a great lifestyle because that height is used for basketball playing and lots of other, things that get you a lot of money and great lifestyle for being tall.
Yeah,
But
you could have a house that has like more vertical space in it, so it takes up less surface area.
Sure.
Yeah.
But once you get in the city, you have on average 0.8 children per couple. So you have a whole country around you. Anyone who has children that happen to be over 6 feet tall move to the city, and those children don't reproduce. And used to have a large smattering of different height people out in the country. And tall people would sometimes reproduce with short people and have average-sized kids. Sometimes average people would have some short kids and some tall kids. But the more often tall people got with other tall people, the more tall people there would be out there because tall people tend to have other tall kids. Now, all the tall people are slowly migrating to the city and not having kids, so the general height of the population keeps shrinking as the tall people remove themselves from the breeding population.
I suppose this isn't really a problem as long as it stays small, right? No, I mean it, because like Singapore can't import, just because they're not big enough, all of the world's high IQ or tall people, however we want to phrase it, right?
Do you want to know why this post was made originally? Because the leader of Singapore, Yan Q something, God, I don't remember now, was commenting about Japan and saying that Japan does not allow basically any immigration. They're very xenophobic and their population keeps dropping. That's a major problem for them. He's like, why don't you implement the same policy we have? That would be great. Japan has like over 100 million people in it. If they want to keep their population from having every generation, they got to import a ton of people.
You know why they're not doing that?
Mainly xenophobia, I believe, right?
Oh, well, yeah, but I mean also, like, because they're just going to replace everybody with robots.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, they're trying to do that too.
They're already getting pretty good at it. There's some scary, like, customer service robots that I've seen recently. And caring for the elderly robots, because lol, aging populations and not enough people to replace them.
Yeah.
The government's desperately paying people to reproduce.
But the original post was like, Japan, sure, Singapore's great. Singapore has a couple million people. Japan has over 100 million. How many high IQ people are there in China and India that you can import? Like, you're going to completely denude the Asian continent of high IQ people as they move to Japan and then stop reproducing. And pulling it out to the U.S. at this point, for the past decade or so, I know we've seen this specifically because we live in Denver. We keep getting a lot of people moving to Denver. They're moving often from rural areas. I know when I had a house, we had an extra room and we would rent it out to people for, 6 to 12 months at a time. And of the people we rented out to, about 3/4 of them were people who were moving from rural areas. They didn't have a lot of money because jobs pay for shit, so they could only rent out one room. But then they would come here. They were smart. They were driven. They got jobs. And then they would move out after 6 to 12 months and get their own place now that they have good paying jobs where they can afford them. But we were contributing to that problem because, again, Denver, metropolitan area, the denser a city is, the lower the reproduction rates are in the U.S. It's not nearly as bad here. Suburbs help the problem a bit.
Do they really, though? Suburbs are kind of...
A little bit. It's not as bad as Singapore.
They make other problems.
Well, okay.
Yeah. It's not as bad as Singapore is what I would say, so it won't
You will
happen
not
as
go
fast.
to jail here for spitting out gum on the sidewalk.
Well, our
I don't know if that's still
reproductive
a
rate
thing.
is above 0.78. But yeah, the thing is, like, the smart people from rural areas are being drawn into our cities in America, and in our cities, our reproduction rate is less than two children per woman. So again, we're having on a slower scale. It's not happening as fast as it does in Singapore, but we're drawing in the smarts, and then we're killing the smarts off.
Smarts.
I mean, we know what's his name. I guess I would use his less.
You realize I'm one of the people.
Uh-huh.
Like, I literally came and slept on your couch,
Uh-huh.
and then drove around and was like, wow, people let me go in traffic.
Yeah.
And, like, there's lots of dogs.
Zeke is
Mountains
one of
are
those
cool.
people. Zeke comes from like a tiny ass hick town. He got his own words. He got out of there as fast as he fucking could because he's smart and he's driven. He went to college. He now has a great life here in Colorado Springs where he gets paid a lot and does tech stuff and enjoys, his living. But also, I'm assuming not going to have more than one kid, possibly 0 kids.
So what the other solution here could be,
Which means that his town is now got less smart because he left it.
in the local example of your renting out a room, you could say, we'll only rent out to people who are having kids.
That's stupid.
It is, but that would also but at large scale, that's what Singapore could do. You can come here, but you have to reproduce.
It's not working for, well, I guess, yeah, maybe if you preferentially just import people who are pro-natalist or already have kids, but
Or
like,
already pregnant.
Japan is, the government of Japan is like sort of desperately trying to get people to reproduce.
There's articles
And
Or
every
at
now
the same
and
time,
then.
encouraging that they work 70-hour work weeks.
Yeah,
and,
it's the
torture 'em.
reason people aren't reproducing is because they're all depressed.
And busy.
There's frequent articles, why aren't Japanese youth having sex anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, because you make me go to work for 10 hours a day and then go out to work for the mandatory socialization for 6 more hours. Like, when am I supposed to be doing all my fucking?
I mean,
right?
I think that is but a part of it. We don't have that problem in the U.S., and yet we also do not have children.
The U.S. has an above replacement rate reproduction.
Only because we have a liberal immigration policy. If it was just U.S. citizens who were born within the U.S. borders, it would be below replacement rates.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
We allow a lot of people from other countries who tend to have bigger families, and they will keep that going for a generation or two, and then as they get more Americanized, their children have less and less children. Like, my parents came from Poland, more traditional society, and they had 4 kids, but we've become very Americanized, and out of the 4 kids they have, they've only got 2 grandchildren right now.
So 2 quick
And
things.
it looks like they will only ever have 2 grandchildren.
So one, my answer about like just forcing your roommates to get pregnant is obviously
That's terrible.
was a joke. Yeah. So don't at me on that one. But this seems to the logic of this seems to suggest that we would have less people now than we did 2 centuries ago.
It's not a thing that's been going on for 2 centuries, and also not necessarily less people, just less high IQ people on average. It's only been going on, I think, for a couple decades, maybe 3 at most.
Starting sort of with the industrialization, and then even more specifically with a knowledge-based economy as opposed to just, people working in factories or office workers.
I think knowledge-based economy is part of it. I think the fact that it's a lot more expensive to have children now is a large part of it. I think a big part of it is just society, like how much we value children versus the other things we can do with our time. Like, I think there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I don't see this being a continual problem.
Oh, really?
It feels to me like it is also the kind of thing that will be self-correcting, but curious to hear whether you're going to say the same thing I was going to say, Steve.
Probably. Something along those lines. Like, I just imagine that if in 2100 we're down to 5 billion people, because people just aren't reproducing because it's too expensive for, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. The population is projected to stabilize at about 10 billion for actually that reason. As more people get rich, the reproduction rates keep getting lower, and that's the estimate right now, that it'll start slowing down and stop at about 10 billion or so.
Well, that sounds like a sustainable number. That's not so bad. No, I mean it. Like, the other thing too is that even if we have lower IQ on average per human population density, we will have more high IQ people on the planet.
Oh,
because there's more people.
Okay, yeah, perhaps.
So like whatever problems we need high IQ people to solve.
Well, we're not going to have that many high IQ people for that long if we keep shredding them, right?
So, may I interject?
Please.
Few things. The Flynn effect is apparently still in effect. It seems like a lot of the... hang on. Let me find a definition.
Of the Flynn effect?
It's just the tendency of IQs to go up over time,
yeah,
right?
Secular increase in population intelligence quotient.
Yes.
Let's see, intelligence typically increases around 3 IQ points per decade. And, so it seems like what has to do with this is a combination of factors like just better nutrition, better, science-based medicine, better economic,
better education as well.
And, sort of crystallized knowledge also plays into IQ, as well as
better utilization of the internet.
Yeah, the internet.
To serve as a brain proxy.
So, so sort of in general, the population, if these trends continue and we don't, global warm ourselves to death or nuclear war or zombie apocalypse or whatever, it seems like that's one way it could be self-correcting. The other way is that we're just getting a lot better at brain science, and it seems like nootropics will get good enough that we can raise the, not sanity, but...
intelligence waterline by pumping it into the water supply.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. If right now, making up numbers, we have X percentage of the population that is 1 standard deviation above, or 2 standard deviations above the average score of 100, right? Mm-hmm. If in a century or two we only have, there's fewer people that are 2x or 2 standard deviation above the average, but we have way more people at 1.5 standard deviations above. Mm-hmm. It still seems like we've got a solution, and that problem could be solved not through just genetics, but through the other factors, right? Better education, better tools, that sort of thing.
I strongly disagree. In not that I don't think it's great to have more people 1.5 standard deviations above that, and to keep raising the average. Those are both great things, and I hope they both continue for a long time. But I also think that just having lots of more smart people is a good thing, and that the IQ shredder effect is a very bad thing, and we should find some way to encourage high IQ people to have more children, because having more IQ in the gene pool is great.
I hear what you're saying. I guess those aren't two those two projects aren't they're not at cross purposes.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you can continue to raise the average IQ of the average person by
Flynn affecting and stuff.
Yeah. Just through whatever factors come in there, like nutrition and again, all the factors.
Yeah, you can keep Flynn affecting the population while still IQ shredding the outliers.
Right, but I guess it would be better to have a planet with 1% of the people who have an IQ of 145, or a planet where 90% of the people have an IQ of 120.
So, we keep focusing on IQ, but what they were actually referring to with the case of Singapore was like highly intelligent and highly driven people. Intelligence or IQ, which is a slightly different thing,
Yeah.
does tend to anti-correlate with, for example, agreeableness. I find it like kind of interesting, you know, that
Really?
All these smart assholes aren't finding mates.
yeah, well, like, you know, the
I mean, high IQ also tends to correlate with political liberalism. You're more likely to accept people with greater distance from your politics.
yeah, I guess I'm saying there's trade-off. Well, first of all, we're hyper-focusing on IQ to the exclusion of conscientiousness. There are, I believe they haven't been replication crisis studies that show that the best scientists aren't necessarily the smartest ones, but just the hardest working.
Okay.
Remember Methods of Rationality, Harry being like, you know, the hat offered him Hufflepuff, and he was like, oh, I'm not good enough for House Hufflepuff. Those are the ones that do all the work.
Yeah.
And
No, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm just saying that the genes for high IQ are actually really important. I would think it would be great if we would have a lot more von Neumanns per generation than we actually have.
conscientiousness would be nice too.
Conscientious was all. I mean, why not both, right?
There's yeah, exactly. I mean, I wish I had more of the latter. I have like a 130 IQ, but I'm kind of a mess because ADD and whatnot. Higher IQ seems to correlate with more like brain problems. It seems like average IQ is conserved, or at least that's my pet theory.
Well, if we are taking all the people who are high IQ and driven and conscientious and bring them into cities and shredding them out of the population, doesn't that have bad implications for what's going to happen to the global population?
Well, not all of them. So the thing is, you're also selecting for the kind of person that would want to move to Singapore. In the article, they mention... Actually, let me find the quote, because it was funny. How many bright Indians and bright Chinese are there, Harry? Says Mr. Lee. Surely they are not infinite. And what will they do in Singapore? Well, engage in the finance and marketing rat race and depress their fertility to 0.78, wasting valuable genes, just so your property prices don't go down.
Yeah.
So, like... But, like, you know... The kind of person that wants to live in a very conformist society where, like, people kind of behave like machines.
I mean, in the case of Singapore and
Maybe
Japan...
just going to go there anyway, or live like that anyway.
Sure, in the case of Singapore and Japan, although the people who don't have, you know, enough IQ/conscientiousness/drive won't be allowed in there, but, like, what about the cases of Denver? A lot of people like to move to Denver, and they're
That's also not infinitely supportable
They
because
don't need to be
property prices are nuts here. I can't afford a house. And then like Aurora, you know, like the suburbs that have been cropping up all around Denver because so many people want to live here but can't afford it are kind of shitty. I mean, some people love suburbs, but I'd really like to do an episode on the book Happy City at some point, which makes a good case for why suburbs are the worst.
Awesome. I would like that. But also, so it selects even stronger for the people who can afford the property prices here, which in our economy means knowledge work, right? It's not like you can get physical labor to get paid all that much. So the people who are most able to do high value knowledge work are the ones who have the most of that IQ, drive, and conscientiousness combination. They'll be the ones who can afford the best places here and thus be the highest IQ and lowest reproducing ones, again, driving those traits out of the population.
I wonder also if Denver has, like... Does Denver have a lower, like, reproduction rate than... I mean, I guess cities maybe in generally do than compared to, like, suburbs and rural areas, but
there's just less area to sprawl.
There's also a lot of young people here that maybe just haven't reproduced yet. It seems like a lot of 20 and 30-somethings primarily are moving here because it's, like, a young city.
That's the best time to have children.
Well, yeah, but
people,
I mean...
people used to have all their children in their late teens and early and 20s.
We might just have not counted them all yet. The age of fertility is, like, continuing to go up as medical science gets better. There's in vitro and other cool stuff happening, and I still want to have kids, and I'm about to be 35.
Right,
and
you can delay childhood or child bearing to later and later, but the later you delay it, the less likely it is to be successful, and also importantly, the less likely you are to have more than 2 kids.
This just seems like something...
2 kids is just baseline replacement, and I mean, are you planning on having at least 2?
I would like exactly 2,
okay,
or maybe more.
All right, that 2 at least is replacement. I know a lot of people don't even want to have that many necessarily. I mean, are you planning on having any kids, Steven?
No. And if we were, I would want just one.
Yeah. I've already sterilized myself, so, I mean, I have some sperm on ice because I thought ahead, and I was like, maybe
Smart.
30 years from now I'll have a crazy brain aneurysm and want children, and at least I'll have something.
Or you'll be able to clone yourself. I remember you were a fan of that idea.
I would like that.
I wanted to suggest the idea, or like I wanted to ask, like, hey, did you by chance just save some, in case? But if you hadn't, I didn't want to, like, be like, you would have had this facepalm moment already, but I didn't want to re-facepalm you.
Right, yeah.
I think you could also now take germ cells and make them into germ cells. Like, we know how to do that. You could take a skin cell and make it at cost. I mean, it's very expensive, but
yeah.
Like, I kind of just don't worry. I feel like technology and sort of just the fun effects sort of increasing IQ, and then also things like liberalism and changing values to be more of a post-scarcity society will just solve this problem for itself. Okay. It seems like the kind of thing that if it were a problem would have already happened, and maybe like listeners know of historical situations where this did happen, so I might be wrong, but it just seems like, IQ shredders are a thing that seems like they probably should have existed in the past for the same reasons.
I don't think it was even technologically possible for them to exist in the past. We've only had modern birth control since, the late 50s? And it didn't become widespread until the 70s.
But
and even then, we didn't have all the...
that is.
I think it's a huge factor.
I know it is a factor, but I wonder, because it seems like more,
It's the biggest factor because now you can actually choose when to be reproductive or not, and...
Well,
I think all the social factors and the cost factors also make a big difference, but just the fact that you can decide when you want to have kids is probably the biggest thing, because before you didn't have an option. But like my parents didn't choose how many kids to have; they just were married and kids happened.
There were such things as like nunneries and monasteries and voluntarily celibate people. A lot of scholars did that in the past.
Yeah, I mean, Newton didn't have any kids.
I know.
And he could have.
Sucks.
But I think he was also a complete piece of, he was an asshole, so I'm not surprised. But
very disagreeable.
I don't think that. I don't think Plato had kids. I don't think Aristotle had kids.
How did you know?
The same records that indicate their existence. I don't think they wrote about having kids. I could well be wrong, but at some point, I think to an extent, IQ shredders might have been a thing in ancient Athens, but probably to a less. They weren't as efficient shredders.
I mean, if anything, I think that up until the recent past, it was the other way around. People who were more intelligent, more productive, tended to have more children because they could afford to.
Could be. Yeah, I'm not a scholar of human history.
I mean,
yet.
It's complicated.
But you make a compelling point that
it's complicated by the fact that in the past, one of the ways to be productive was to kill people and take their stuff. So, as Genghis Khan showed.
And if you were a dirt farming peasant, you couldn't afford 17 kids. You'd either
I think you could not afford 17 kids. One of the reasons people reproduced so heavily in the past was because you needed kids to help work your farm and take care of you in your old age.
I also had a huge death rate back then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. I have I think I probably said this before, but I looked at a family tree that my aunt had dug up, and the family members who had come over on not the Mayflower, the other one, with William Penn, had something like, I forget the exact number. It was more than 10 kids, and then more than half of them died.
I was
lots of names crossed out early on that family tree, and that was just the norm. Lots of women died in childbirth too.
Yeah, I know I already mentioned this on the Mind Killer, but of the Afghanistan population, more than half of them were born and lived under U.S. occupation. They weren't alive yet back when the Taliban existed. The median age in Afghanistan is 18, and the war's been going on for more than 18 years.
That's wild.
I know, right?
Other people are dying.
Is it because other people are dying and they have a high replacement rate? Yeah.
Well, that sucks.
I mean, yes, it does, but that used to be the norm. Average age in pre-modern countries is in the late teens.
There's this misconception a lot of people have that people didn't live as long in the past because people lived to the average of 30 or 40 something, but that just meant that more people died young.
Yeah.
I mean, people still could live to 80s and 90s and even 100s.
Just was pretty goddamn rare.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, people lived, even many of the founders of the U.S. back before they knew enough about nature to wash their fucking hands, they lived into their 70s and 80s. I think Franklin died in his 90s. But yeah, so I think I need to just look this up. I'm sure it's out there. So yeah, the average lifespan of our ancestors 200 years ago was 30 years. All right, now control for the ones who lived past 3. Now what was the average lifespan? And I'm guessing it was like 55, right? So that's just random
that's
hot
about right,
numbers. But okay, so the solution here seems to be to breed as much as possible, right?
Or make AIs, and then we'll just have our mind children replace us.
I am a big fan of solving the problem
or
through
animals.
an orthogonal path to victory here, right? Like this is like the same thing to many of the problems that I worry about sometimes.
Like Singapore seems like it would be a really bad idea because I think they're the shipping capital of the world. So even just like from totally selfish reasons, like that would be a bad economy to knock out. That would fuck us over.
Wait, who said nuke? Who said nukes? I didn't know.
No, what I'm just sort of like this strikes me as sort of like somebody's trying to freak out about something that I think first of all like probably we haven't determined whether this is a real problem that will not just self-correct.
I mean,
but also, what's the solution?
I think there's a lot of solutions. I think Brian Kaplan is trying to push one of them when he wrote the book. What was the book he wrote?
With Zachary Wintersmith?
No.
Reasons to have more kids and not worry about it or something like that.
Yeah, the one we talked about earlier, where he said that.
Let me actually look up the name. So
as long as you aren't neglectful or abusive, your kids will probably turn out all right. So have a bunch and don't worry about like putting huge amounts of time and resources into each one.
Selfish reasons to have more kids.
There we go.
Why being a great parent is less work and more fun than you think.
Yeah. Hypocrisy isn't a refutation, but how many kids does he have? If it's less than 4, I'm calling bullshit, Brian.
But I think he actually is writing about his experience having multiple children.
Yeah, and either way, that's more just me nitpicking and having fun.
I mean, I think one of the answers would be to make having children less expensive and less stressful.
Apparently it is, according to this book. There's this sort of thing that happens where...
Yeah, he's trying to make it less expensive and less stressful, but I mean, that's a societal thing.
I think a lot of the costs of children is actually just sort of artificial. First of all, unschooling's cool. Secondly, older sibling or older children can take care of the younger children.
No, I agree, but that's not the way most people do things because they don't believe they can. They don't believe that'll be good for their kids. And that is why...
he has 4 children, exactly.
All right. And that is why, popularizing a book like that could be good, as it shows people you don't have to spend that much on each kid.
Yeah, that's one way to go. I mean, I also think that one avenue towards this correcting a little bit is that I suspect we're in the process now of shaking off this stupid idea that college is necessary for a successful life outcome. Mm-hmm. So parents who are putting away $160,000 to put their kid through school can not do that, and they'll realize having a kid costs me $160,000 less than I thought it was going to over 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, not just that. Not only is it easier for the parents, when kids also feel the stress of I can't have any children until I've gone all the way through school and have a decent job lined up, pushing average reproductive rate in America. I think it's out to 26 years now, which is almost 10 years more than it used to be the time for having first child.
Yeah, I think I keep falling prey to that, actually, where the parents that I have talked to have said, there's actually no such thing as a good time to have a kid. The best time is, if you think you want to have a kid, just do it, because there's never going to be a good time. You think that, I gotta wait until, all these things are... But then, that's also what's prevented me so far, because I'm I don't make enough money yet.
But
I don't know if I have a stable enough home life to have a kid in yet. Apparently none of that matters anyway. Parenting does nothing, so...
But there are bad times to have a kid, though.
Yeah, every single...
During a pandemic, for example.
Or when you're 16. Even if that was the case 150 years ago.
Or when you're going to college. I don't think I know of any, or have even heard of any female person who has had a kid in college while trying to complete college and continuing
person I
to do
dated
it.
in college was in her 30s, had a kid who was in her teens. She had gotten knocked up young, and then the kid was actually really smart and cool, and we would all sort of hang out together and watch Firefly. And
right, but would you go to college and plan on having a kid in college with someone else and just keep doing the college thing? That's part of your college
maybe
plan.
But I'm kind of insane. I also I've done some strange things that I like doing hard things.
In general, that's considered not a thing that you can do in college.
I kind of read Scott Alexander's My IRB Nightmare and was I'm going to get into clinical research.
Oh my God, you are nuts.
I think you're right. That's no one's plan. And this is more just demonstrating your point. But then again, I only knew 5 people in college because I was not a very social person. But I knew one person who had a kid and went to school. I think she did take a couple years off You know, while the kid was in his infancy,
Yeah.
went to school, finished, and I'm not sure what she's up to these
You
days.
can do
Did
the
she
thing of
plan
just
to do that?
taking
To have
less
the kid?
than...
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
it's no one's plan to have a kid while in college.
because what a weird plan that would be. There's enough going on in college. And
But
it's
that
like,
means that the typical plan for anyone who is smart enough to go to college is to delay first pregnancy until at least 25, 24?
but that doesn't seem like to be the crux of the problem, that they're delaying
It's
the
not
age.
the crux of the problem, but that's one of the problems. Like pushing reproduction down to 0.78 takes a lot of levers in a lot of different ways, and that's one of them.
Yeah. I mean, well, okay, so real response, then joke response. Real response is that it could be that, like, all right, well, if you're a smart, perfect homo economicus, you could be like, well, if I drop out of high school at age 16 and get a job bagging groceries, I can afford to raise one kid. If I go to college, and again, pretending like college worked, and made you more money, I can afford to have 3 kids if I wait until I'm 26. Mm-hmm. So, like, they would still do better for all those purposes if they waited 10 years, right?
Maybe
in this stupid thought experiment, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing if you were to wait as long as you had more, but that just seems not to be how things actually work.
I mean,
Then the joke response was that it sounds like Texas is doing the right thing by stopping people from not having kids, right?
No, fuck that.
I know, but
Okay.
I just wanted to fan the flames because I guess
I think one of the important things is to reduce the stigma of having kids early, that it's only something that, the dumb and the low class do. I think it's important to reduce the appearance of that you have to spend a lot of resources to do it. And I also think it would be great if people started taking the, being of the opinion, like, I have high IQ, I have great genes that should be present in the next generation if I want the human race to flourish. Like, people should want to, I know I'm being a complete hypocrite.
hypocrisy is not an argument nullifier. You're
but
good.
I mean, it would be great if, like, people who are smart realize that that is a very valuable thing and it is good for the human race, and they are doing a good altruistic thing by putting more of their genes into the next generation.
It does kind of seem like kids have better outcomes when there's more of a village, and that there's this common theme of parents wanting to have grandchildren. And so, like, yeah, maybe, it would be good to try to promote, like, hey, your kid should have kids while they're still living with their parents, and so they're not having to, work a job and support themselves. The parents can be there to support the other parents. The grandparents can support the parents. And then, like, you can get all the child rearing out of the way and then do all of your higher education stuff that you want.
Yeah.
It seemed actually to be quite freeing for my ex, who
Like a
had a
three-generation
teenage
model.
kid that was, like, pretty much taking care of herself at that point, and then she was just going to college at 30 and doing all the other stuff.
Interesting.
You're right, though. There's a huge stigma against that,
Yeah.
where it's like,
Considered a low-class
right.
thing.
You have a kid at 15 and you're finishing high school and your parents are raising your kid.
Even
that
if you have a kid at 20, that's considered low class.
It's
Maybe here.
probably, yeah, probably some, but I'm picturing just like because at 20 you could
Like,
be
you
living,
can't
you could be living on your own because you could have a real job and
You
stuff.
could,
right?
but at 20, you can't even buy your own alcohol, and you're already having a kid?
Well, you also can't drink alcohol and give your baby
I
fetal
know.
alcoholism syndrome.
I understand, but,
being a troll
it's very much a, kids having kids idea if you're having a child at 20, and that you should
Emotional
be more
maturity is
responsible.
kind of low, like, but also you're healthier. I think, like,
You have a lot more energy for those fucking kids running around.
I've heard older parents say kids keep you young, and then I've heard other ones say that that's a myth.
They grind you
truth.
down!
So I did find this Marginal Revolution article about why Singapore has such a low birth rate, because we kept sort of throwing around just our guesses, and I was curious. So, just to summarize, and we can link this, Singapore, Singapore does education very well, and education lowers birth rates. 2, Singapore land and housing prices are super high, and that makes it costly to have a family, and long working hours are expected. 3, Singapore's a lot more fun than it used to be, and in this regard, it has improved more than, say, France has. Children are a bit more fun because modern life is safer, but, in scare quotes, the fun of children is subject to Baumol's-Kost disease, which I'm guess means children aren't actually super fun, compared to, like, I don't know, making lots of money in the stock market and then going on a cruise, or whatever people
Spending
do.
it all on hookers and blow.
And gum. I don't know. Not gum. 4, women are
Controlled
doing very
substances.
well in Singapore, and arguably they're not so willing to marry down in terms of income and educational status. Which actually, I remember that's a problem in China, as well as the sort of selective abortions by gender. I find it still really funny how people didn't think that was going to ever bite them in the ass.
It almost reminds you
It's
of
one of
those
those Moloch
insects.
things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the second we're allowed to dictate ourselves the way that we controlled those bugs in that experiment, you're right. It's like, oh yeah, let's just go ahead and shoot ourselves in the foot. Let's just spend 30 years lining up that shot.
Oh, wait, there's more. 5. Singapore's generous childbearing subsidies do not work because women are still expected to shoulder so many of the responsibilities of child rearing. 6. Modern fairy tales do not work. Rap music also does not work, nor do government-sponsored cruises and speed dating services. 7. It is suggested that population density lowers birth rates. Interesting. 8.
That sort of makes sense, though. Like, if it's crowded,
Yeah,
you know,
I guess.
I'm not inclined to, like...
I do still hear people, like, being really upset about overpopulation, and I'm like, I think that's actually another self-correcting problem.
Well, and those
You don't want it to be self-corrected through disease and famine. That's
You
a pretty
don't,
shitty
but-
correcting mechanism.
but those people are... people are worried about overpopulation now are... to me, yeah, I was going to say not worth listening to, but dumb is a shorthand for that. In Singapore,
or have
though...
different values. I think they're like, oh no, the like overpopulation is ruining the earth and, you know, murdering animals in the natural world.
That's
There's some
true.
people that care about that.
I'm anchored on the first person that articulated this, and they're like, we're already running out of space. I'm like, have you been to Nebraska? Anyway, but the...
Running out of space where people want to live.
Right. But, shoot. Oh, Singapore is a small island, though. So their space might actually be a restricting factor. I'm not sure how dense that
Yeah, I
population
think they've
is.
got like lots of skyscrapers and postage stamp apartments and whatnot.
Yeah, Japan's small, or tight, tight-knit as fuck, or the
Well,
people per
actually,
square meter.
Europe
Japan
is
has a
pretty
weird
fucking
thing
dense
of
as well.
having the most preserved forest land, like per square mile of country, which to be fair is quite small, but they
be
have
fair.
their sort of indigenous religion reveres forests, so they have like really really dense cities and then like lots of forest.
That sounds beautiful.
It is cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Oh yeah, 8. This is the last one. And then childcare and subsidized childcare have become less common in Singapore than in France. I guess they just keep comparing it to France. Though, apparently Singapore knows about all of this and is trying to change it, so
But if you're going to have kids just to ship them off to childcare all day anyway, what's the point?
kinda. I don't know.
To boost the average IQ of the country, if that's what your concern is, right?
I mean, but that's not anyone's individual concern. So they want good lives for them and their one child, maybe if they
Apparently,
have one.
That's
most
why- that's-
people...
That's why this is a problem.
Well, that's also why, like, I'm wondering what the proposed solution here is. Like, who is this essay for? Or is it just to raise the alarm? Okay, yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off, Chase. I was just getting.
I was when you were saying why like people would have kids just to ship them off to nannies or whatever, like it actually seems like most people just have sort of a innate drive. Like they feel unfulfilled without children. It's a societal expectation. You know, they've got like the parents saying like, "Where's the grandkids?" And
Well, I mean, this is all I have on the IQ shredder right now. Like, be great if smart people had more kids. Hopefully we can avoid this with technology. Maybe just make people immortal soon.
Yeah, sort of like when I think about the big scary problems facing humanity, I'm just sort of like,
But also, if you're smart, maybe think about having children because it would do everyone else some good.
you can be one of the ones that helps upload everybody, and then we can just all reproduce by splitting.
Hell yeah, we cannot get to that technology if we're all too dumb to make that technology.
but we just need one person.
Yeah, we
Right.
need to get lucky with that one person, and the more super smart people we have, the better. So, start boinking, guys.
All right, the moral of this week's episode is get out there and boink. Have as much unprotected sex as possible.
Unlike the three of us,
And slash
because we
or-
lead by example.
Don't move to Singapore if you're smart and hardworking.
I mean that one too, but like, who wants to stay living in rural? I mean, I'm sure there's some people, but for the most part, if you're really smart and driven, do you really want to stay in the rural nowhere town where you can't have a future?
Well, Happy City is maybe a good answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is I don't think there's necessarily a bad thing with living outside the city. I guess I'm thinking too with a lot of work becoming remote. You can get paid San Diego living wages and living in bumfuck Kansas.
Yeah, live in Bumblefuck, work remotely in Singapore, maybe?
Maybe that's what's going to help fix this all in the end. Moving to remote work where people can live in cheaper places and have more room and decide to have some kids.
If I can buy a 5-bedroom house for like $35,000 in Wichita, but still be making San Diego money, what's stopping me? Other than the fact that I have to live in Wichita, but you know, somebody will be willing to make that trade off.
That's one of the reasons a lot of people do move to big cities. Like it said, they're a lot more fun. There's a lot more to do. I bet there's no goth clubs in a 1,000-person village.
But if you're making every year 5x what your house is worth, you can just start your own goth club.
Yes, you can start your own goth club, but you need a lot of people to come to the goth club for it to be fun. And you're not going to find many goths in a 1,000-person village.
Well, fingers crossed that we just, get to insert singularity solution here, and before this all becomes a problem, That's my final thought. Clearly, my mind is wrung out on this.
We are all done. We should wrap up.
We should.
Should we thank a patron, though?
We should definitely thank a patron. And,
never too wrung out for that.
A thing I wanted to say about patrons is that we were talking earlier about reproducing, and also like how reproducing memes is maybe as important. Like, you talk about this IQ shredder, and I guess you need people high enough IQ to absorb some of these memes, but the memes themselves are a big deal, right? They keep the culture going. One of the things that I've always really been proud of with our community is that the average podcast has a listener support rate of between 0.5% and 1%. We don't have a huge audience, but our audience seems to be pretty dedicated to the mimetic fitness of their ideas or whatever, because we have more than 3% of the people that listen to us supporting the podcast, so more than triple the average rate for the average normie out there. And I've always been kind of proud of that.
That's pretty awesome. I didn't know that figure.
Yeah.
Well, who's the standout person today?
The standout person today is, once again, Łukasz Stefaniak, who I wanted to say his name because it is Polish and I know basically how to pronounce it, although admittedly with a very heavy English accent. We have a note here. Apparently, Łukasz has been a supporter for 3 years or more and has given... Is this the right number?
Yeah, I don't know if this is...
Holy crap.
Is the decimal point in the right place?
Well,
yeah.
No, I guess I was just saying I didn't ask if they wanted us to read this number. I just put that so that we would know.
Dude, we got to give props.
So they needed special something from us. I messaged on Patreon saying what can we do, but nobody ever takes us up on that.
Over $900 in lifetime support from Łukasz.
And that was whenever I put that line on there. It's probably more. So that's insane.
That is, yeah.
It's mind blowing.
We are flattered. We are honored. We are glad that you find us, consistently valuable over all this much time to keep supporting us and keeping this thing going.
I really like our, fandom. That's a weird thing to say. I guess our audience. Let's say that feels less celebrity-ish.
Yeah.
Like, why haven't we been canceled yet? We're making episodes encouraging high IQ people to reproduce.
It's not that cancelable, is it?
No, but it comes on the heels of you encouraging young people to have sex with old people. So,
well, I mean, that's just self-serving. I am maximally selfish. Yeah. So
we've got a great community. I was just thinking about that on the drive over. I was thinking about some of the emojis on the Discord, don't feed the trolls, and there's just a good sense of humor, and we don't
very little drama.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not
fun.
even. I was gonna say it's not even self-policing because there's nothing to police. It's just people hanging out as grown-ups, and it's tight. So, and by grown-ups I mean in the Enochian sense, not in the. What was that?
Encouraging the audience to all reproduce with one another. Come on, cancel us.
I mean, it's not a bad idea. We should have a big Bayesian conspiracy orgy.
Sorry, I'm busy that weekend. Yeah, and I was going to say that they all are hanging out like grown-ups, and I mean that in the Brodsky sense, or whoever book you wrote, but I'm attributing it to you.
Okay.
Rather than the age sense. I mean, we've got young people, but they're mature. They're young adults, right? They're not adult children.
Right, yeah.
All right, well, I'm clearly feeling very articulate.
Anyways, thank you all for that. Thank you specifically, Łukasz. Again, this is great. We are happy to have this going, and I guess we'll see y'all in 2 weeks.
Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.